Hello. Chair, we are live.
Peace Accountability Board regular meeting for Wednesday, October 9th, 2024. And let's start with the land acknowledgement. The city of Berkeley recognizes that the community we live in was built on the territory of the Root Tree, the ancestral and unceded land of the Tichinyo speaking Ohlone peoples, the ancestors and descendants of the sovereign Verona Band of Alameda County. This land was and continues to be of great importance to all of the Ohlone tribes and descendants of the Verona Band. As we begin our meeting tonight, we acknowledge and honor the original inhabitants of Berkeley, the documented 5,000-year history of a vibrant community at the West Berkeley Shell Mound, and the Ohlone people who continue to reside in the East Bay. We recognize that Berkeley's residents have and continue to benefit from the use and occupation of this unceded stolen land since the city of Berkeley's incorporation in 1878. As stewards of the laws regulating the city of Berkeley, it's not only vital that we recognize the history of this land, but also recognize the only people are present, members of Berkeley and other East Bay communities today. And this brings us to the call to order. Agenda, call to order, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chair. For the record, this meeting was called to order at 6:31 p.m. I'll now proceed with roll call. Chair Moore.
Present.
Vice Chair Wilson. Vice Chair Wilson's currently absent, but she stated that she'd be participating remotely on a just cause provision. We will amend the record once she joins. Okay. Board Member Calavita.
Here.
Board Member Lefkowitz.
Here.
Board Member Blackaby.
Here.
Board Member Cayetano.
Here.
Board Member Moses. Currently absent. And Board Member Williams.
Here.
Okay, on behalf of the ODPA, we have Director Aguilar, Investigator Borden, and myself, Paulciano Smudillo. Joining us remotely, we have Investigator Wechter. On behalf of the BPD, we have Chief Lewis and Lieutenant Montgomery. On behalf of the City Attorney's Office, we have DCA Hylas. And on behalf of the City Manager's Office, we have Dr. Arredondo. And Chair, with that, we have a quorum.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you, and good evening, everyone. We're gonna go to agenda item number 2, which is the approval of the agenda. Is there any additions, subtractions, anything we'd like to move around or discuss? Now is our time.
I just noticed a small typo, 10A. I believe that should be policy reviews, not police reviews.
I think that was on last month's agenda too.
Oh,
Thank you for that. Is there any other changes to the agenda that we need to make? Okay. If not,
Motion seconds.
can I get a motion? Well, can I get a motion and a second, please?
move to accept the agenda.
Second.
Thank you. And that will bring us to agenda item number 3, public comment.
Thank you, Chair. As a reminder to those attending virtually and physically here with us tonight, speakers are generally allotted up to 3 minutes, but may be allotted less time if there are many speakers. They may comment on any matter within the board's jurisdiction at this time, except confidential personnel matters. At this time, I'll start with those physically present before moving on to our virtual attendees. At this time, is there anyone that would like to provide public comment?
And we do see that policy complainant is present. If they want to speak regarding policy complaint, there will be an allotted time for that. So but right now you can speak on general matters.
Okay, with that said, I'll go to our virtual attendees. At this time, if you are joining remotely and would like to provide public comment, now is the time to do so. Again, if you'd like to provide public comment, now is the time to do so. Chair, at this time, there are no hands raised.
All right, not seeing any hands for public comment. That's going to take us to agenda item number 4, approval of the minutes. We're looking at the minutes from regular meeting, September 25th, 2024.
I move that we accept the minutes.
Second.
Is there anyone that disagrees? Not seeing or hearing anyone in disagreement with the motion, we'll go ahead and move. We'll approve and go ahead to move to agenda item number 5, ODPA staff report. Director?
Hey, good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board, members of the public, colleagues. Thank you for joining us tonight. Just have a few updates and then I'll turn it over to our friends at the city manager's office to see if they have any input, and then we can take some questions if you have any. So just wanted to provide an update that we have officially provided the offer to our data analyst candidate. He has accepted, he has filled out his paperwork, so he'll be starting his first week at NACO with us, so he came just in time for that. We'll officially introduce him at the next meeting. We are still in the process and we're advanced a little bit faster than we anticipated with our move, so we'll keep you updated on that. I think you're gonna be very satisfied when you see the new space. So we're excited about that move. This past week, we had the opportunity, or since last meeting rather, the opportunity to participate in the city's Hispanic Heritage Month celebration. It was a good opportunity for us to be out there. We had a good time, even though it was very hot out there, but good interactions with the community members. Just an update, we did formally withdraw the FIP report from the council's consideration at this time. We are in the process of notifying the Public Safety Policy Committee. They had a meeting schedule that was canceled, but we're in the process of making sure that they understand we're withdrawing the downtown task force report for consideration at this time. And just as a reminder, it was presented to the Agenda Rules Committee and then referred to the Public Safety Policy Committee, and that's where it currently sits. Wanted to just make a quick note and mention there is a training that our office participated earlier this year, and I wanted to open up to the board members. I'll follow up via email if there's any interest. It's an online training. It's 4 weeks. It's not 4 continuous weeks. It's split up. It is East Coast time, so you do have to wake up a little bit early for it, but I thought it had some really good information. It's by the Dago Learning Center, and they touch on, this particular training is on internal affairs. So the topics that they discuss there are administration of internal affairs processes, ethics and integrity, agency policies and procedures, the complaint process, investigation of personnel complaints, administrative law, the interview process, special investigations, use of force reporting, First Amendment and free speech, audits and inspections. Because this is not specific to California, it's very broad, so it's talking about big concepts, federal law. There's certain stuff that applies to us and themes, but obviously we still do the very specific localized training that we need. But this, I'll circulate it around for our board members if there's any interest in participating. I wanted to bring to your attention two recent reports that might be of interest to you. The CPE, or the Center for Police and Equity, is it is an entity known to this body. They just put out a report called Compounding Anti-Black Racial Disparities in Police Stops. I have not read it yet. Excited to read it, to see what information is in there. It was authored by actually a former colleague of mine, Matthew Graham, who was the research analyst while I was in DC of our Office of Police Complaints there. So I'm interested in there. I think it's an important discussion to still continue to have. So we'll circulate that report. Also, Healthy Black Families put out a report titled Healthy Black Families in the Fight for Thriving Black Berkeley. It really historicizes the Black experience in Berkeley, so I recommend that report. I'm still consuming it, but we'll circulate that as well. I want to turn it over to our resident NACO expert, Jason Wechter, if you can give us any updates on NACO.
Good evening. Well, the NACO.
We can't hear you, Jason. Is it on our?
Can you hear me? Is that better? Is this better? Can you hear me now?
I think he must be muted.
No, he's unmuted, but for whatever reason, Jason, we can't hear you. I'm gonna go to the city manager's office while you work that out, and we'll come back.
Okay.
Okay. That alone.
Thank you. Good evening, board members, colleagues, and community. City Manager's Office would just want to give a friendly reminder and update that we are scheduled for a special meeting on October 29th at 3:30 p.m. for our fall 2024 Reimagining Public Safety update. In addition to that presentation, I also wanted to share and reiterate that the Reimagining Public Safety Division and DEI Division will have tables at the Harvest Festival on Saturday, the 19th. So just looking forward to seeing folks there and connecting with everyone. So that's all we have for today. Thank you.
Thank you. Jason, we're back to you. You're still working it out. And the vice chair for the record has joined us. So let the record reflect that. We can take some questions now, and then if Jason still has some updates, we'll allow him some time.
Any questions for the director?
The vice chair, just for your situation awareness, just provided an update, but this is the time if you have any questions for our office, we can provide any updates on anything you may have questions about.
Okay, thank you. No, sorry I'm late.
Director, is civil all up and running, the intake system, all that's fully operational at this point?
It is, it is new to us too, so, but members of the community are filing complaints. So we're still easing into it until its full functionality. We still haven't migrated the, historical data on complaints. So what you'll see now is from when we made it live.
Okay. Is there a gap allows for reporting yet for us to see, or is that more just for internal consumption for your?
Yeah, the public facing, it's already available, and what we can do, systematically, we could pull out the report and include it for each meeting, so you have the printout. But, that's one of the, are you able to pull it up real quick, just so they can see? That's one of the benefits that we, appreciate about that community members can tap in real time and see the activity there.
Thank you.
Director, on our website, on the PAB website, is there a place where the public can get our reports, our various reports? Like because I've not been able to, I haven't seen those.
Yeah, so there is, and since we're there now, so we just do a walkthrough, and thank you for that question. It actually trips up two things. So, the website functionality, it's structured in a way that, it creates issues for us, but there is a confusion for community members about what's where. We do have a report section, there. As a practice, once the board approves the reports, we post them there. One report that we hadn't put there was the, downtown task force report. Actually, community member brought it to us. Because it was in this limbo stage, we just weren't sure as to, our practice was when it goes to council kind of thing. But now what we'll do, as soon as the board approves it, we'll put it up there. Which trips up, I think, another issue in terms of overall communications and engagement with community members. I know, Vice Chair Wilson has been, nudging me behind the scenes on social media, presence for us, and that hasn't, escaped my mind now that with our final vacancy being filled. I think we have a little bit more bandwidth to be able to take on the projects that have been, sitting there. But the next part of this will be also to engage community members, both with our website and social media, so. And this is civil, which is live. This is where you can find out, real-time information about the complaints. This is the actual, right? So right now, yeah, this is, again, it doesn't include the, beginning of the year data, right? We haven't migrated that, so this is just the data from when we get live. And one last, Mr. Chair, an announcement I want to just highlight. We had the opportunity to meet with our new city manager, and he is very well received by the community and internally by the staff. I floated the idea of coming to this body, and he's interested, and he's has committed to October 30th at your next meeting to stopping by. So. And Jason, are you ready to go or?
Yes, can you hear me now? Can you hear?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. So the NACO conference begins this Sunday in Tucson, Arizona. I know some of you will be attending. We have over 600 attendees. So logistically, I want to let you know it's being held at a resort hotel that's probably at least 5 miles from downtown Tucson. So it's quite isolated. So if there are any things you think you normally think, oh, I'll be able to run to a corner drugstore to get that, you won't be able to. They do have a gift shop there with some essentials, but do be prepared for that. It will also be quite hot, and it's a dry heat. Sunday from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. is a day-long session for board and commission member training that I'll be attending. I believe you had to pay something extra for that. The schedule that I'm looking at is on the NACO website, and on Wednesday at 5 p.m. Sorry. Tuesday at 5 p.m. Director Aguilar and I, Tina Barr, the training coordinator for NACO, Paul Ashton from the Washington, D.C. Oversight entity, and Inez Garcia from, I forget which county. I always forget which county it is in Virginia. We'll be doing sort of a discussion talk about needed training for board and commission members, ideas for what type of training could be presented, how it could be presented, and please look at the handout because there's some very good materials I moused from other jurisdictions. From San Diego, their commission for their police department created their own training modules. From San Leandro and from Denver, and we can borrow from each other. And the idea is to generate ideas about what trainings each board and commission might benefit from, and maybe NACO can look towards providing some of those in a recorded format, because I know how logistically difficult it is to provide training during your evening meetings when you have a lot of other business to take care of. So that's what's going on. It ends on Thursday. There are no NACO webinars this month. There will be an election on Wednesday, beginning at I think around 12 or 10:15. I know we have one organizational membership. So I don't know if all the attendees want to collaboratively assess the candidates and decide who they're going to vote for. But there was a candidates forum NACO did today for 3 of the candidates, and last week for 4 different candidates. They're both recorded, so you'll have an opportunity to read them. And all the candidate statements are also on the NACO website. So I'm looking forward to seeing you, so many of folks from the office and from the commission there.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. I appreciate the updates. And that will take us to agenda item number 6, which is Chair and Board Members Report. At this time, I do not have anything to report. Is there anybody who'd like to take this time now from the board to speak? Okay, that's gonna take us to agenda item number 7, Chief of Police Report. Chief?
Good
Welcome.
evening. Good evening. Thanks. How's my sound?
Good.
Okay, cool. Looking forward to hearing about NACO conference when you guys get back. I did want to share that Deputy Chief Tate and our OSPA manager Arlo Malmberg will both be attending as well. I'm hoping to get there next year if my calendar allows. Myself and some other staff will be attending the International Association of Chiefs of Police this year, which bumps right up against NACO, so it created a couple conflicts for us. As far as my message and what I wanted to share today, I wanted to share that over the last couple weeks, department leadership has been very focused on moving forward with our ALPR project and also working on reviewing and prioritizing recommendations around the Citygate report. So I'll start first talking about the ALPR. So I'm in the process of completing an off-agenda memo on behalf of the city manager that will go to council and to both the PAB and the DPA, updating where we are on the camera installation and rollout process. So this is a major new project, and there's a lot of steps it took to go to going live with that technology. You know, the early steps included the council approval process through the surveillance technology ordinance, getting funding, obtaining the installation permits, and then doing the actual installations. So far, we are only partially through the installations because we are waiting on Caltrans permitting to complete some of the right-of-way installations on both San Pablo Avenue and Ashby Avenue. That struggle with permitting is one that other jurisdictions are also working through. We are moving forward on an initial deployment phase in our department with a small number of users. So experienced officers, supervisor, detectives, and some members of dispatch in order to test the deployment. So the goal of that is to conduct an initial training, to refine what our protocols are going to be about responding, and to train the instructors who will then train the rest of the department. So ultimately, we know this system has the capability and possibility of really effectively enhancing public safety. But we also know that there's very important balances around ethical obligations, privacy, security of data, how that's shared. So to that end, there will be mandatory training. No one will be able to access or supervise someone who is accessing that technology without having gone through mandatory training, which covers both policy and operational steps. There will be very strict protocols about how we deploy. We also know from talking to other agencies that there is a large number of hits that come through on a given time, on a given day, based on reading license plates. And our officers will be very specifically directed by me that they have to prioritize other responsibilities in the city. They have to verify and confirm the data that they're getting from that read. That, you know, we're going to set those steps in place to ensure that this is a successful pilot program of that technology. So we do expect that there'll be a learning curve. There'll be a lot of activity at first, and then we'll settle on the best protocols. And I know that a lot of policy work has been underway also with a subcommittee working with Deputy Chief Tate to kind of move some of those processes along also. Next, I want to talk a little bit about Citygate. As you know, the study was completed and published in September. So I did want to acknowledge the draft letter that you're all looking at tonight. And thank you for writing that and really helping. It helps me know where your concerns are, and I think it'll be valuable for council. So I look forward to seeing what comes out of tonight's meeting and how you land on that report. I've, on my end, been meeting with members of executive staff and command staff to identify what themes or priorities are in that report. There's a fair amount of work that's already underway or that has been completed that we really want to raise up. That's in that report. We know it's a large set of recommendations and priorities, and we won't be able to either pay for or do all things at once. So we know we're going to have to really set priorities and raise that work up. And I know that the guidance we get both from the board and from council will be really important as we figure out what those priorities are. Okay, the other thing I wanted to give a brief update about tonight is, and I apologize, I meant to get this to the chair and director a little earlier today, but I just got it out a few minutes before the meeting, is that we just completed our most recent EWS quarterly audit. So I shared that report. And I wanted to give you an update on where we are with the RFP process for the EIS platform. So that project to implement that. So just to back up a little bit, the quarterly reports, we won't stop doing those until we can go live on the platform. So we're just going to keep that process moving forward. It may sit in the position that it's in now as far as the depth we go and everything like that. But the goal is it keeps happening until we go live on the platform. So where we are on platform implementation is the RFP request for proposal closes tomorrow. We expect there to be submissions from a number of quality vendors. As soon as that period closes tomorrow and the submissions are in, we will have a joint evaluation committee to review those proposals and land on a product we want to go with. Like we did for the consultant work, that's going to include membership from the PAB, membership from our Berkeley Police Association, and Berkeley Police Department leadership. So we know that that's the best way to get to a solution that meet and confer things can get ironed out, that the board is picking something that they think meets the goals, that from a management perspective, we're looking at a tool that will give us the system that we need. So we know that this collaborative approach is going to make sure that all the stakeholders can have a voice and we get the best possible product in our city. So that's all I had to share. Happy to answer any questions if there's questions from the board.
There is, I definitely have a question. I'm gonna reserve mine. Do you guys want to jump in now? Is there anything on topic right now that you'd like to discuss? Member Calvita?
Chief, thank you for that report. Can you walk us through a little bit, when you talk about deployment in the context of the ALPRs, it's been a while since we looked at, the ALPR technology and so forth. Can you walk us through what that looks like? So when hits come through, what will happen then? What happens?
So there's a couple different ways hits will come through, and fortunately for you, sitting at the table with you is Lieutenant Montgomery, who is one of our leads on rolling this program out. So he'll clean up what I say if I don't get it exactly right. But there's a couple different ways this can happen. There can be a hot list or a list of stolen vehicles with information associated with that's in our stolen vehicle system, SVS. That's like the most traditional sort of way we learned about these things in the past. So if a vehicle passes through that reader that's on that list, an alert would come in. The department also will have the capability of creating a hot list. And an example of when that might happen would be citizen calls in and says, someone's doing a catalytic converter theft in front of my house. There's a white car out in front. It's a Honda Accord. The license plate is X, right? Gives you a full plate. That would allow us to enter that into our system immediately so that as that vehicle travels or exits the city, we could make a stop on it. It would be able to track that vehicle. Other jurisdictions could also have a hot list that we accept into our system. So if there was a homicide car from Oakland, we would have the ability to see that if it entered into our city. So there's a couple different ways we'll get alerts about it. And then the communication center, so dispatch, and then the other way is just a car or SVS. So we already talked about that. So our dispatch will receive that report, and then we'll have a protocol for whether or not it meets our threshold for putting it out, because we will not be able to put out over the air every single hit that comes through, because they won't all ride. There'll be just too many. It'll overwhelm our system. And we will want to prioritize those things that are of the utmost importance, felony vehicles that are wanted, things like that, for when we respond. So all of these things, how many calls we get, how we deploy to them, how we allocate resources, are all the things we're working through in this trial period. And we're trying to get to answer all those questions. And one of the very specific directions I'll be giving to officers is, before you engage in that stop, you have to, you do not take the flock hit as all you need. You still have to have probable cause to stop that vehicle. You have to verify that that car is the car that's on the flock hit. Did the camera read the plate correctly with the car that I'm seeing? Do I run the plate and it comes back to something that matches what that return says it is? So you have to verify and confirm that that is the right car for the right reasons. The other thing an officer is going to be directed to do is say, do I have adequate resources to detain this vehicle? Do I have available cover? What's the want for? What else is going on in the city? Is the city busy with other things? There's going to have to run through sort of an assessment of whether it's a good idea to stop that vehicle. So, we're learning a lot. We know that a lot of other agencies just turned the technology on and figured it out as they went. And we are more interested in trying to learn from other agencies about how they directed that. I spoke to a number of other chiefs, asked them for the documentation they used as they built out sort of protocols. Our experts, like Lieutenant Montgomery, are really diving into what it looks like when what's the user see and how we best protect both our community, so that we're working using this technology safely, how we train our officers to make sure they're following policy and protecting all these other rights when they do it. So we're trying to really methodically step into this work.
Just a quick follow-up. So those hit alerts, they don't go to a centralized place, but rather patrol officers out there on their beats receive alerts that there's been a hit? Or
So if you think of it as an app, that platform will have the ability to alert you that a read has come through. But we are being more controlled about how we roll that out by just having our dispatch center and certain other super users start with that to see what that flow looks like first, and then we'll roll it out farther. And I don't know, Lieutenant Montgomery, is there anything else that you think that should benefit from hearing about that?
Yeah, I think it's a limited rollout so that we can get used to it, and then also the tactics and the decision making of making a stop. But most in the early stages, most of them will be comm center controlled, and so a comm center operator will have the window up, giving the alerts, and if it meets the criteria, they'll stage a call, and then we'll assign officers to that call. Some of the super users and detectives can use the tool to alert themselves individually about their investigations and might not alert the whole department. So as that grows and as we get really good at it, we still want to take, more eyes are better to make sure we're doing a good job. We want to make sure that the tactics or the actual operation funnels back through the comm center, and we create a call behind it, even if it was an officer or super user who first got the alert. So we send it back to the comm center. We run our operation to find and stop the vehicle through the comm center, like we do for a couple other technological systems like LoJack or bank trackers or things like that.
thank you.
Board Member Montana, then Board Member Moses.
Hi, Chief. It's always good to have you here in this meeting. Just following up on Board Member Calavita's question, do you think you could just share which jurisdictions you're looking at for comparative jurisdictions for ALPRs? I think the board would just be interested in sort of like looking at it as well, like what other jurisdictions have been using ALPRs and sort of what to expect over the next 6 months while you roll it out.
Yeah, I would say almost every jurisdiction in our county is either about to go live, just went live, or has been live for a while with this technology. So I attend a county chiefs meeting monthly, and we talk about various hurdles in that. That's an opportunity for me to say, hey, what did you see when you first rolled this technology out? And that's when folks shared with me that, like, hey, it was really helpful for officers to set really clear protocols to talk about the different times a call might come in, that it was really helpful for officers to know or be reminded. Because at first the inclination was, oh, I got an alert, I have to do something. I have to run, and then everyone was like kind of rushing to that call when it came in. And so a common feedback was, hey, set protocols that give people permission. Like, it's okay if you don't have the personnel to go and everybody attacks this problem and deals with it. And it's okay if you initiate a stop and it doesn't meet a threshold for pursuit and the car takes off, that the car takes off. It's still a win that you have told that person that, like, we recognize that you are engaged in behavior that's not okay. Don't do it here. And it's sort of like, so there's wins and different pieces that can be successful in all of that. Specifically, agencies that gave me actual documentation, Albany, who was about to launch, to provided me some materials, and the Kensington chief who had rolled out and was the one who implemented the program. I think in San Pablo, he's the one that gave me a lot of that advice also. And he was like, that's the things I made sure I said very clearly when I pushed out the policy to kind of get everybody on the same page about what the community expectations were around the technology.
I have just a couple more questions, if you don't mind. The second thing is, I know that the department's really interested in sort of like evidence-based, policing practices. And so I'm curious if you're going to track how the ALPR deployment affects like resource allocations in the department, because we have like prior to this, we know what your baseline is, and you'll be able to track it going forward, for staffing purposes and for beat, how many officers you need on beat, especially with the city gator part, thinking about that.
Yeah, and I think it's a great point, and so we have identified a very specific designator for those calls. So we will be able to then run those calls, right? And look at, how many officers typically respond, how much time they typically spent on the call when the call came in. And we'll be able to be at, even as nuanced as, oh, it was something that we originated and we're just looking for versus like the car was hitting and we were engaged with it. All those things will be part of what we analyze. And you're absolutely right. Like that'll be one of the balance points. They're like, hey, we had our threshold wrong for what we decided we really wanted to engage in, and it pulled too many resources away from the other places we wanted to be, and we don't want that. Or we had people breaking from things that affected our other call response times. So yeah, we will absolutely be tracking all of that as part of whether or not we consider this to be a success or not.
Great, maybe it's a problem for Arlo to tackle. And the last thing is just more of a comment. It's appreciation for your continued interest in the deployment of the EIS. I know it's going to be a lot of work going forward, but I think the board is excited to get into it. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you, Chief. I just wanted to follow up. You talked about how the system left to its own devices would overwhelm the resources that we have, which obviously makes sense. But I wonder if you could put a little more context around that. Roughly how many hits are we seeing? This might be a question for Officer Montgomery, but how many hits are we seeing, and what percentage of those are being broadcast?
Yeah, and I will say that we're not even to that stage necessarily yet because we do not have full implementation. We're I think a little under 50% implementation because we're still working through the Caltrans right away. The limit lines are very narrow as to what we're receiving and how we're gathering information. So I don't want to start. I don't think we're ready yet to say what we would even anticipate the total number of hits to be in our city for that technology until we kind of land based on this test period on what we think our capacity level will be for what we alert out. And I will tell you that there can be thousands of hits that go unresponded to in other jurisdictions.
And I imagine that either stops will go up or the severity, the type of stops that have a higher severity will go up, and sort of the distribution of those stops. Is that also what you've heard from other districts, or which of those two paths tend to be true? What do you expect?
Yeah, so if you're tracking sort of the legal landscape, there was a recent case out of LA that dealt with a felony vehicle stop for a 10851 case, so a stolen vehicle case. And there were a lot of mistakes in that case, at least from my limited vantage from the outside. A lot of things that could have been done better. But that's part of the training piece. So we will be ensuring that our personnel understand the rules around when and how they engaged in a felony stop. What we are, nothing changes about the rules, our policies set for people on who we stop, how we stop, when we pursue, how we pursue, just because we are getting a report of a stolen vehicle or an alert of a wanted car from Flock versus from our traditional SVS, dispatch created alerts. And so we're really kind of holding our personnel to that, like, just because you're getting a lot more of something doesn't mean you change the standards and procedures and policies that we have set in place.
Sure. I think I think that's additional felony stops and higher impact policing on more severe issues, I think is a good thing. And I'm trying to understand that if you anticipate the amount of arrests for felonies to go up as a result of this technology, or right. what's that sort of long-term downstream impact that you are anticipating or measuring?
I expect that this technology will allow us to be more efficient and effective on the stops that we make. And so I would expect that the outcomes of our vehicle stops as they relate to these hits will result in more serious crimes, because these are the cars that are coming into our city to conduct robberies, or to do other crimes like that. And a lot of our robberies involve gun, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's kind of this natural thing. Like, this is going to focus us on really problematic vehicles potentially, which is going to increase the likelihood of more severe or serious crimes we encounter. And probably, if anything, I would expect it to raise our yield rates. That we would have higher numbers in that sense. You're right that our overall stops will likely increase as a result of this. But I think we're stepping into this technology, so we just don't know exactly what we're going to experience.
Board Member Lethwich?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on a question that was asked of Deputy Chief Tate at our last meeting regarding, or was in response to a Chronicle in-depth series about clean record agreements. And those are those secret agreements that allow officers who are on the verge of being fired for misconduct to collect lifetime disability pensions for injuries that the employer has challenged. And I understand that they're one of the motives for cities to enter into these agreements, that they save cost of litigation. So just looking prospectively, I wondered if the department would consider agreeing not to enter into those type of agreements in the future. I personally don't know a lot about them. I don't know, for example, the city attorney's involvement or other departments. But I think it's important. So I would understand if you would, not be prepared necessarily tonight to respond. But I'd appreciate it if you could look into it and get back to us, because it is an issue of concern, I think, to our board, even though we haven't formally discussed it. But I know it's an issue of importance to the general public as well.
Yeah. A couple comments that might answer your question. One is workers' comp processes are completely separated from personnel pieces. So we don't, no matter of discipline could impede on a lawful workers' compensation process. And as far as whether I would make an agreement to allow someone to medically retire in lieu of termination because of misconduct, that would never be a starting place for me. But I will say that I sit at a stage in the process that's in the middle. So I review a case. If I make a recommendation for termination, pursuant to the MOU, that employee has a right to appeal to the city manager. They're gonna appeal to the city manager if I recommend termination. That process then goes to the city manager's office. The city manager office sits for that next level appeal and makes a final finding about whether to uphold my decision to terminate, or to give a lesser punishment or no punishment at all. If the city manager decided to uphold the termination, that employee still has the right to go to arbitration and appeal that decision. And then the arbiter would make the final decision as to whether or not that termination was upheld. So I have never seen anywhere in all of that process where rights of workers' comp can be affected or are even part of the conversation as a bargaining tool or whatever. But there are situations where at the city manager level, in consultation with the city attorney, settlement agreements are made between an employee to resolve things pre-arbitration. But again, I've never heard of in this city us ever being able to combine the conversations around an injury and compensation for workers' comp injury for a work-related injury to ever be part of an agreement around whether, you know, the terms of a termination or retirement or resignation.
Okay, but thanks, but just so I understand, you're saying it wouldn't be your call, that it would be up to the city manager and the city attorney to decide whether to enter into one of these clean record agreements?
I have never seen or experienced that, nor would I raise that as my proposed level of discipline to is it, I mean, are you speaking just about this workers' comp piece? Or was there more to the article about a clean record? Like I'll retire, like you retire, we won't say anything bad happens, that kind of agreement?
Right.
Okay, because when you said workers' comp, okay. So yeah, that decision about ultimate settlement of a case in that manner would never be made at my level.
Okay, thank you.
Board Member Berkeley.
Chief, thanks for sticking with us and being on the firing line here. Shifting gears a little bit, there's been kind of a flurry of serious injury collisions the last couple of weeks, a couple this weekend in the Marin Circle and at Adeline and Russell. Obviously, just a reminder, we still have a long ways to go to reach our Vision Zero goals. Any comments on it, any learnings, anything we're seeing, things to just think about going forward from what we've seen the last couple of weeks? Yeah, absolutely. It's been a rough patch for us with serious and near fatal collisions, especially on repeat locations. And we take all those really seriously. And one of the things that Vision Zero gave us was a protocol for rapid response when these kinds of serious or fatal collisions happen. And what that means is the police department sits down with transportation, traffic engineering, city attorney's office, and we look at whether there are immediate steps the city can take to make a location through engineering safer. You know, we've had cases in the past where it was like, if we could put these different lights up or cut this tree or do whatever, and it would just help that location. So those things get kicked in almost immediately, whereas there's a lot of process that goes into processing the scene and writing a collision report and getting that kind of data. We sit down and try to do a rapid assessment about whether there's steps we can take. You know, my arm in the enforcement arm of Vision Zero is much lower down intentionally on the Vision Zero plan or protocols. The goals are to look at engineering solutions, to look at education, to look at different ways we can affect behavior. This month happens to be Pedestrian Safety Month, so we do use grant funding to get out there and do pedestrian operations where we look for locations that have been highlighted on our Transparency Hub about traffic. So if you don't know and you haven't checked out our Transparency Hub, we have a traffic specific page that allows community members to highlight places that they find are an issue, which allows us to then look at the data in conjunction with that and plan that kind of operation around that. Today we participated in the bike walk roll National Day to get kids to school, you know, in a pedestrian manner. And it's just like us being out and about, us talking to the community, us talking to kids, and really trying to look at where we see locations that are intersections for serious and fatal collisions. And we do a lot of work to focus enforcement around those areas that are the behaviors that are driving that kind of issue.
Chief, that actually brings me to the question I wanted to bring to your attention. At the bike walk roll event, you know, my wife, Katie, she was dropping our kids off at the junior high today. And she was a little she was concerned. I got a phone call where I was at that something had happened at the school. And there was police at the door and there was lights going on. And I proceeded to get 3 or 4 more calls from community members dropping their children off, especially from the Latinx community who were uncomfortable that they didn't know what was going on. And just for the overall safety of not only their children, but of the community. And the reason that I bring it up to you is these parents called the principal, and the principal didn't know that you guys were out there. And so there was a moment of confusion, nobody knew what was going on. And I really wanted to bring that to your attention, only because the community response was clear and convincing on my end. People were concerned. I just wanted to share.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Is there anything else that anybody would like to share? Any other questions for the chief? All right, thank you very much, chief. I appreciate
Have a
you
good
taking
night.
the time. You too. Which brings us to agenda number 8, which is the subcommittee reports. It says 10 minutes, but I bet you we can do it in 2.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll go down the order by the subcommittees, and if you have any comment, feel free to share, or any updates, please feel free to share. I'll start with the regulation subcommittee.
Out of curiosity, is this a chronological order? In other words, that's in the longest lasting committee that we have?
They are in chronology.
Because we're still trying to get these regulations finalized, and the issue now is that the labor negotiators have had a really hard time getting all the stakeholders on the same page in terms of scheduling our next meeting. So really, we haven't had a meeting since I reported 2 weeks ago, because I don't know how many of us there are, maybe 10, and getting people the same time slot is very difficult. But anyway, I think we're zeroing in on one, so hopefully next meeting I'll have something to report.
Could I just add to that? Just that, I think we're very pleased that the city attorney's office reconsidered their prior opinion about our board's subpoena power and the conflict of interest issue. And we appreciate their positive response to our memo on those topics.
I second that. And great job, Julie.
And I should say thank you, Julie, who did that analysis successfully.
Okay, fair and impartial policing? Any updates?
No, nothing to report. As the director mentioned, it's been withdrawn. We've asked to withdraw it for the time being till after the election.
Surveillance technology? Don't believe there's any updates. Okay. Downtown task force and biking allegations?
Similarly,
Okay. Body worn camera policy, any updates?
No, although I would just note that policy or it's at issue in our regulations. So, I don't know if we're gonna, certainly it'll be the next, policy that we consider after we, have resolved the vehicle pursuits policy, but we may need to expedite the analysis because it is at issue in our.
Conflict of interest subcommittee? No updates. Policy complaint, 2023 PR 003. Don't believe there's any updates. I know I still owe the vice chair, some additional information. But I'm not sure if the vice chair has any other updates.
No.
The policy review subcommittee?
I can provide a brief update. So we met today and we're gonna have another meeting in a few weeks, and then we'll be meeting with the department on the 24th. We're in the process of trying to narrow the issues, where we agree and what we don't agree on. It's been very difficult because we have 2 parallel versions of the policy that we're working with. So that's been a challenge. On this form, though, I just wanted to note that Sergeant Spielman isn't the contact anymore. It's Sergeant Rafferty. He's going to be.
Perfect, we'll make that change. Okay, budget and metrics?
No update.
Okay, outreach and engagement? Okay. And on behalf of staff, we know we owe you a set of commendations. Investigator Gordon and I were actually categorizing them for you.
Thank you.
To be able to move those along. Off-duty conduct? No update. Operations and processes subcommittee? No update. Okay, and then the next subcommittee is actually one that will be assigned board members today. which is the review of policies 1010 and 1034. Any updates from our liaison regarding these areas?
Chief David.
Perfect. And Chair Moore, any updates on these reviews at this time? Okay. With that, that concludes subcommittee updates.
Excellent, that takes us to agenda item number 9, old business. 9A is discussion and action regarding the Citygate Associates LLC workload organizational study of the Berkeley Police Department and the PAB's potential response to the report. Director.
Thank you, Chair.
Just for the members of the public, the draft letter for this item is on supplemental packet number 2.
Okay. So just a quick background on this, and the chief mentioned it tonight. There's a Citygate report that has been provided. The board has had several opportunities to review it, to consume it over the past few weeks. The chief indicated she's going to council with it, and she has already reviewed the preliminary, letter in the packet, and it was drafted by both Board Member Cayetano and the Vice Chair Wilson, so I wanna open it up to them to see if they wanna add any commentary and walk us through it.
Sure. I don't think I have commentary. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I unfortunately was not at the last meeting. I did have the opportunity to listen to the recording. And hopefully we captured feedback that the board will feel comfortable providing as kind of a collective response to the Citygate report. I don't know, Board Member Cayetano, since you were there at the discussion last time, if you have anything more to say about the draft.
No, nothing more to say based on our previous meeting. I think that, we tried to incorporate Vice Chair Wilson's substantive edits or comments into the memo, and if you guys have more, we're definitely open to incorporating more. I think the focus was on both the methodology and the policy gaps that we saw, but we didn't talk too much substantive the last time, so I think we should do it now.
Just want to thank the board members, Cayetano and Wilson, for what I think is a really excellent job. And probably was a lot of work. I just had one substantive suggestion and then a typo and a question. On top of page 4 of the, not of the packet, but of the memo, it's about giving the substantial investment into SCUs, and the possible reduction of sworn officers needed for certain posts of service. The memo wonders why Citygate would recommend 19 new positions in that context. And maybe here we should also say something about the inability to recruit for the many empty positions that are already funded in the department. It seems to me to be an important point to include here that we're down. I forget, we didn't have an update on that, but I think there's 180 funded positions and we're down to 160 or 150. Anyway, we're having a hard time recruiting to fill the existing positions. And so maybe that should be mentioned in this memo. Then there is one small typo on the top of page 2 where it says, it's the 4th line, it says related, and I think it means relied. Analysis related, it means relied, I think. And then on page 2, number 2, I was unclear the meaning of the last sentence under 2. Citygate's reliance on the standards it selected, which necessarily do not reflect any local priorities. had a profound effect on the report's conclusions. I don't know what effect that was or which conclusions were being talked about. So I just was unclear about that.
I can take that one. So Citygate, so there's a number of standards and benchmarks that are referred to in that report. And one of the key takeaways is that we need to set some, and that's why one of the recommendations is that the council set sort of service expectations. So in the absence of the council having set those or the department, Citygate is importing standards from other entities. So they refer to this NEPA, I think 911 response time standard. They refer to the fractile standard. 90% of calls will be responded to in this amount of time. Various standards. So ultimately, it impacts their recommendation about how many staff the BPD needs. Specifically, their adoption of this, I think the International Police Chiefs standard that you should have a 60-40 ratio of available time for calls versus, you're out working versus time that you're not working, for lack of being more articulate about it. So that particular 60-40 ratio drives their determination of how many officers are needed for patrol. And that is what is really referenced there, because the city hasn't set its own standards. Citygate's picking and choosing which standards it's going to use. And that's not wrong necessarily if they don't have anything else to use, but that is directly related to how many staff Citygate identifies BPD needs.
Right, I understood that where it was explained elsewhere. I just thought this sentence is a little confusing. I couldn't.
Okay.
We can re-reference the rule of 60 in that section.
And including highlighting the criticality of council initiating and concluding this work promptly. It's just vague. I can't understand exactly what work. I mean, I understand it now that you're explaining it, but it's just, yeah.
Okay.
Can I just respond really quickly about the recruitment piece? This Citygate report did have a section on recruitment.
Right.
So I guess my question for the board is, generally we support the department's effort at internally reorganizing or like making recruitment efforts. Do we have any more than that we want to say? Because part of the report basically said they recommend building recruitment teams and looking at incentives and things like that. Should I just note that we support that, or is there anything else that we want to add? Or?
I don't know enough to know.
Okay, I was just responding to your comment about the empty positions.
Yeah. Okay. I thought that section where you talked about the recruitment recommendation number 1 with regard to the culture. I mean, I thought you handled it well. I just thought in talking about the new positions, there might be a parenthetical there that we can't even fill the ones we have.
Okay.
Any other points?
Just, again, I thought this was fantastic. A couple things. Second to last paragraph at the very end of the document kind of makes an important point about in the restructuring that by increasing use or reliance on CSOs also makes it more difficult to ensure accountability. I'm just wondering if there's any, because the last sentence believes that those performing public safety duties should still be accountable to the community. So to me, it kind of begs the question of how. Do we have anything to say there, or do we have nothing we can sort of offer there?
Yeah, I was being implicit, not explicit. My recommendation to this board would be to formally recommend that CSOs be put under our jurisdiction if they were to engage in these expanded opportunities. So that would be my recommendation. I didn't make it explicit because we didn't talk about it.
Which would require a charter amendment, right?
Right.
I'm not
Understood.
sure we can do
Or an ordinance with the council.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's dependent on them adopting these recommendations though, but it is like a big gap that forms if Citygate's analysis is undertaken by the department.
So maybe it's just maybe there's just something that says we should have more to say, or more thinking about this or something, because it just felt like we kind of left it there and then just sort of moved on, but maybe it's that, you know, we know this will require a fair amount of, you know, I don't know, it requires more thought in terms of how this would work or how the accountability would work. It would just be nice to sort of observe a little bit more there, that we know that this could be a gap that needs to be managed.
I think just name that, we currently don't have jurisdiction over that.
Yeah,
So there is no
should be
oversight.
something, right, that council and PAB should, you know, consider. Okay, something like this, something that just, so we park it and recognize that we're parking it, it's a little more
Or we
explicit.
could say, or we urge the council to consider how they could be more accountable, or something, urging the council to.
Yeah, I just want, yeah, I know we don't have anything specific to recommend, but just a little bit more on that. And then, I thought maybe even in closing, as always, we look forward to partnering with the council department if any follow-up is direct. We could even be more explicit, like, hey, we'd be happy to initiate this work on referral, like, you know, from the council. If we wanted to invite it to come back, we could. That was another thing I was considering to sort of, the logical step is the council says, yes, these are all, we agree with all that, and now why don't you go help figure it out? So I was just thinking we could make that more explicit, that we would welcome the opportunity, happy to initiate the work, take this back if, you know, if they refer it back to us, something a little more direct. And then the last thing I had was at the bottom of page 2 on the funding. And this gets back to this whole discussion about the sworn positions. My assumption on number 4 is this is funding any new positions above and beyond 181 already authorized. So this is not saying you shouldn't hire for the 30 positions. This is just saying no more, right? And so again, I think that is clear, but at least it stuck in my head if we wanted to slightly more clear.
Yeah, that's right.
Sorry, go ahead, Vice Chair.
Yeah, it's not saying you should do a hiring freeze. It's just funding beyond the authorized. Back to Kitty's point, they have many vacancies right now to fill. And I think there was an issue we flagged, because you could say no more funding for patrol positions, or you could say no funding for positions overall. I think the latter is appropriate because when you do this reallocation of work from officers to SCOs, you will be able to free up some FTEs that could be converted to other classifications. This is just thinking about like running an organization. So I think we would recommend no new positions overall, but that is not a hiring freeze.
If folks think that's clear enough as it is, I'm fine with that. I at least had to think about it a couple of times as I read it, but if that's clear, again, might be better. That's it, thank you.
I just want to reiterate, great work, well
Yeah.
done. Anything else?
I think, can we vote on this with the friendly amendments? Is that?
Sure.
I think we need to, right?
Yes, yeah, by the time.
Is that a motion?
Yeah, I move to adopt this with the friendly amendments that have been discussed. As long as the Vice Chair.
I'll
Doesn't have any more
second
comments? Okay, second.
So I
Sorry,
just
point
confirm
of
that,
order.
I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
this is to go to council and mayor? Where is this? No, okay.
Just a point of inquiry, I think historically, you guys have also signed a sort of a last reviewer before it gets submitted. I don't know if you want to include that as part of your motion, just so.
Okay.
We could do it, but why you send that?
Board member Cayetano, I'm gonna go ahead and make that friendly amendment on your lap right there.
Yeah. I'll second.
Because I would incorporate any other little grammar thing or these fixes that he has the last set of eyes before it goes. Yeah, that sounds
I
right.
will copy it.
So I'll proceed with the roll call vote on the motion to adopt the letter to council regarding the city gate report with the friendly amendments and to assign board member Cayetano as the reviewer before it is nailed out. With that said, I'll go ahead and start with board member Calvita,
Yes.
board member Ludwig,
Yes.
board member Blackfeet,
Yes.
board member Cayetano,
Yes.
board member Moses,
Yes.
board member Williams,
Yes.
vice chair Wilson,
Yes.
and chair Moore.
Yes,
The motion carries 8 ayes, 0 noes.
so that will take us to our use of force review.
We still have, sorry, Chair, we still have item 9B, which is the discussion and action of appointing board members to the subcommittee.
Oh, I intentionally skipped that. I'm sorry, everyone. That was Freudian slip. Discussion and action on appointing members to the subcommittee established to review Berkeley Police Department policies 1010 and 1034. Director? Or Jose, are you on this one?
Yeah, so during the last meeting when we presented our policy reviews. Sorry, one moment while I get my notes in order. For our first review, the subcommittee, or the board voted to establish a subcommittee to review those two policies. And we're bringing it back to, and this was in regards to policy review, 2023 PR 001, which the board considered at its last meeting. Director, do you have more information?
Sure, so in essence, in that report we submitted to the board, there were several areas where we saw that these two policies could have been improved and then to provide some synergy between the regs and the charter, and any other relevant body or any other relevant policies that might be out there. So the board considered to do that work, to take on that particular recommendation, create a policy subcommittee. So that's what the subcommittee would do. Look at ways to just add and find more synergy to those two policies pursuant to that policy report we provided to the board. So you just need to staff.
Can you remind me what these two policies are?
Sure, so these are the ones that regulate the personnel complaints for the police department and the expectations of different tracks, the IA and the police accountability track, and then the other one is regarding the hearing process.
Yes, policy 1010 is personnel complaints, and policy 1034 is complaint review board.
Do we remember this? I think we were trying to convince board member or Vice Chair Wilson that she was gonna run this subcommittee because she wasn't here.
Ha ha ha.
But there was another reason, I forget what it was.
Well, her work is amazing and stellar.
Yeah, I think it was Lieutenant Montgomery.
I believe that's true as well. Yes, that is correct. That being said, I believe in this work. I think to streamline this process and make it easier for all of us trying to do this work, I support it. And if there would be anyone who'd like to join me with this work, I'm accepting offers. All right, just start pointing at you. You're on mute. All right. Well, Board Member Williams. how you doing?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
He's wet?
Yes.
Yeah.
This is what, we're gonna do this. It's gonna be fun. I appreciate
Now
that.
you're going on the deep end on that.
Yeah.
Jump in.
Yeah, jump right in.
So we're gonna do this. I look forward to it. And you know, we can always rely on Lieutenant Montgomery, so we're gonna. I know you're leaving, but you're not going too far. That being said, is there any other board members who'd like to join us? If not, we're excited about this and we're ready to take it on, but I'd like to invite you all. Is there anyone else? Not seeing or hearing anyone, we're gonna go ahead and take that to be us.
Okay.
Thank you. And now that takes us to our new business. 10A, discussion and action regarding the presentation of ODPA police review policy review. Please, Director.
Sure, so we have two policy reviews that we'll bring before you. We're gonna do 23 PR, and that's PR policy review, 0005. We're going to model it in the same way of presentation that we do when we introduce the policy. So we'll go ahead and do a brief overview of our review of this, which is in what is in a supplemental packet, the second one. And then we're going to allow our policy complainant who's here with us, to provide any additional context. Then the board can deliberate and ask questions of the, complainant and or our staff. And then we can, you can take action tonight or, decide how to move accordingly. So I'll go ahead and, provide it over to our policy analyst to give us our overview.
Thank you. Sorry, everyone, I just have multiple tabs on my computer right now. There we go. Okay. So this first policy review, again, it's ODPA number 2023 PR 005. I'm sorry, I need to close a few screens on my side. Just a brief overview of some of the key points. This particular review evaluates BP policies, policy 300, civil disputes, 1200, social host ordinance, and 1202, the second response ordinance. It focuses on alternative approaches to addressing noise complaints, including mediation and procedural improvements in terms of how responses are made to these complaints. As part of the review, we analyze call for service data, not just at the noise disturbance level, but as a whole to contextualize conversation, as well as we provide recommendations for policy enhancements, particularly the use of non-sworn personnel and the establishment of a formal mediation program. As a brief overview of the three policies here, BPD policy 300 guides officers in managing non-criminal civil disputes to prevent violence and crime. The 1200 really focuses on gatherings and particularly against minors consuming alcohol, and reduces, the intention of it is to reduce service costs by holding hosts accountable for alcohol use at gatherings. 1202 speaks to the second response, and it guides BP in addressing public nuisances from large gatherings on private property. Some of the findings that we made, or some of the things that we noted, is that the calls for service and response times from 2021 to 2023 have increased. Out of the calls for service that we reviewed, 8,755 noise disturbances were reported during the 2021 to 2023 period, with 63.21% occurring in the 94704 zip code, which covers the south side of campus. There is, within the data, as you can see in your report, there is a seasonal rise in noise complaints observed from August to October, which aligns with the UC Berkeley academic calendar. Through some of our interviews with the staff that monitors noise complaints, we learned that the 311 system is one of the key sources for noise complaints, where it gets directed to our noise complaint officer or designee within the city manager's office, either the Berkeley Police Departments or other departments within the city, like animal control, for example. And we also learned that mediation is used in a very informal manner through the acting NCO, or the noise complaint officer, with limited formal services provided by other departments and community organizations. Some of those organizations are like SEEDS, which are used for zoning, and the Berkeley Rent Board also has a limited version of mediation between tenants and landlords. Director, and with mediation.
Yeah, one of the areas where we saw would be beneficial to consider, and it's something that's a recurring theme that we get through our office when we have conflict between neighbors. Sometimes they feel like the police officers that respond could have done a little bit more in terms of mediating the situation. And we investigated, looked at this a little bit closely, looked at two particular models, one out of Colombia, the country. And we just want to play a short snippet just to demonstrate how they have packaged this program and how they promote it to their citizenry. Also, as a Spanish capture, much was going to be in Spanish, but there is going to be captioned in English. But just it's a quick video, so we'll go ahead and just demonstrate it.
Okay, just one moment while I get this up for everyone. It's not really cool.
Share sound.
Yeah. This one. Caption should be in English.
¿Y usted ya sabe qué es la mediación policial? Día a día convivimos con cientos de personas en el barrio, en el trabajo, en el transporte y en la ciudad. Y muchas veces se generan conflictos por nuestros hábitos y comportamientos. Vivir en comunidad no es fácil y en ocasiones tomamos el camino equivocado a la hora de resolver nuestras diferencias. Es por esto que desde hoy la Policía Nacional cuenta con un nuevo mecanismo al servicio de los colombianos, y este es la mediación policial. ¿Qué es la mediación policial? Es una manera innovadora y transformadora de prevenir, contener y resolver los conflictos de convivencia acudiendo a un mediador policial. Él nos ayudará a mantener siempre el trato respetuoso con los otros, para establecer acuerdos que nos lleven a resolver nuestros conflictos comunitarios pacíficamente. La mediación policial es un mecanismo que hace parte del Modelo Nacional de Vigilancia Comunitaria por cuadrantes, y ahora todos podemos contar con él. Desde hoy, la Policía Nacional estará capacitada para intervenir y mediar cuando lo necesitemos, buscando siempre facilitar entornos seguros y de convivencia a través de mecanismos de diálogo. La mediación policial es una nueva forma de hacer policía, no solo para mejorar el servicio a la ciudadanía, sino para promover valores de convivencia y una cultura de paz. Colombia se está preparando para la paz, y la Policía Nacional quiere liderar la reconstrucción del tejido social y la convivencia pacífica de los colombianos con esta nueva estrategia. Construyamos entre todos una ciudadanía respetuosa, solidaria y responsable de la mano de la Policía Nacional. Este es nuestro compromiso de corazón.
Not a novel approach per se. So we're not necessarily making an argument, but you also can read the report about these particular case studies we highlight, but also committee members have requested some sort of mediation through either the CSO or the CIS and the reimagining framework. So it's part of the discussion that had in this community for quite a few years. But we also wanted to highlight that there might be an opportunity also for training officers, should that be what the community would like, since they're out there for a lot of these calls and it would not only serve the purposes for noise complaint or noise disturbances, but for a lot of calls for services.
Thank you, Director. And then again, brief overview in terms of the analysis, some of the issues raised by the policy complaints that were brought up during our reviews, again, the increased demand for services and the role of non-sworn personnel. As an area, and as we note in our report, calls for services have gone up, personnel levels have changed, so the number of calls that officers are responding to throughout their shift has also increased as well. As we read through the Citygate recommendations, and even within the, please correct me if I'm wrong, fair and impartial policing framework that the city has, there are recommendations for non-sworn personnel to take on some of these responsibilities, including calls, for example, as noise complaints. Mediation and conflict resolution was also a focus of our analysis, and seeing how different communities have implemented. Beyond the Colombia study, we also looked as an example of the role that the Navajo Nation has implemented with their policing force, and how they have contributed aspects of their culture in terms of the peacemaking aspects, which have had a positive impact in the way that they resolve conflicts within their community members. Another aspect that came up was the use of technology. Through our discussion with the NCO, which is actually hosted within the Environmental Health Services Division, was that part of their noise complaint process requires a 30-minute decibel reading. That requires very specific specs to be able to be used and enforced. In comparing the approach that the BPD uses, because oftentimes they're called a call and that just 30-minute time frame is impossible to use a decibel reader. A recommendation that came up through our discussion there that had been brought up before was the use of essentially mobile app decibel readers. That although they wouldn't be as accurate to spec, The CDC's app, for example, would be able to provide at least a good estimate, as part of as a complementary, factor within an officer's assessment that could take away at least a bit of that aspect of using, their discretion to determine, just accepting that there's people with different, noise tolerances for different, calls for service regarding noise specifically.
If I may, and our complainant also brought this to our attention, this particular app. We have been at different times testing it. We're not noise experts, but we certainly think it could be a starting point for officers who might be out in the field and may not be able to make that call. They're not noise experts themselves necessarily, but sometimes there's a lot of discretion that's provided to officers, and they have this tool, it could be utilized. I did go to the Cal game and I was using it there, and I thought it was a pretty neat tool to use. So I encourage you all to try it out sometime as well.
Of course. And then another aspect of our analysis was, and as it relates to student-related noise concerns, and the dynamics with other stakeholders. One aspect that we note in our report is that when we have what we call transient student population, so for example, students move in and out of dorms all the time, they relocate within the city. That's an aspect that has to be considered through the dynamics with the university, making sure that we improved our reporting methods through the university to make sure that the community and the students can have a good communication to that regard. So our recommendations, again, brief overview is to one, look into updating the memorandum of understanding between the BPD and UC Berkeley in terms to provide a better reporting mechanism for this type of incident to the university, especially when students are involved. Currently only priority 1 calls when students are either the victims or the suspects are reported directly to the BPD. Second is to implement a systematic reporting of university affiliation in this particular context. And this is imagined more in the sense of repeated issues within a particular unit with a particular group of students. The third is exploring the viability of the mediation program or training to better improve that service within the city, as well as increased collaboration with community health environmental service to broaden community education on the noise complaints, as well as the different enforcement methods for that. And as we spoke to earlier, adopting technology for noise reporting and assessment that could better help the response to these types of complaints.
If I may just emphasize the systematic reporting for university affiliation. I know my background. I had a short stint as a campus police officer, and that's some of the things that we wanted to ensure was to provide a way to hold everybody accountable, but also students. And sometimes these things don't necessarily need to be criminalized, and it might be a better approach to refer to the university for them to hold them accountable through their internal mechanisms. So that is I think the essence of that right now we don't necessarily have a reporting system, and because we have limited resources, we can emphasize, hey, university, make sure you do a better job of making sure that your affiliates are abiding and being good neighbors to while they're residing in the city of Berkeley.
Okay, so 4 concluding points. Again, BPD faces challenges with noise complaints due to rising service demand and transient student populations, limiting response capacity. The deploying of non-formed personnel and promoting mediation can relieve the pressure on the BPD using technology like the NIOSH. Sound level meter app may enhance enforcement and build community trust as it relates to the results of those calls. And a collaborative approach with stakeholders is essential for effective noise complaint reporting and enforcement, fostering a harmonious Berkeley environment. Yeah, that's the
I have a question, Grant.
Yes.
So it seems to me that this should be a UC Berkeley problem, and I know there's an MOU, but I'm a little unclear how it works now. If I'm a neighbor and I'm upset and I call 911, do they then divert the call to the UC Berkeley police? Because I wouldn't miss, or how does that work? Because it seems to me that it ought to be more their thing than our department.
We do have our complainant who is available. She just raised her hand, so she might have a response to that, but we'll have to fill in the gaps. But if you allow, we can let her add any additional context, and then maybe or,
Yeah, maybe unless Lieutenant
Okay.
Montgomery has a response to how just the intersection and overlap or lack of communication between the two departments.
So the answer is sometimes it depends. So we receive noise complaints, all types and manners, and barking dogs and people working on their cars in the middle of the night, all the way up to full-blown parties that will quiet down. So typically we send officers to those calls and try to assess and listen and quiet them down. We knock on doors naturally, neighborly, and generally speaking, you know, the large body of them, we get a level of compliance, at least until we leave. And then when we have, like this type of a year that you're talking about, where the parties are kind of really going like crazy in the South Campus, and we get these large party calls and the noise that comes from them, I mean, they'll have stereos on the lawns and those kinds of things. We use, we have party patrols. So typically on the weekends, we'll send officers, and they, if a, location persists in being non-compliant, like they keep partying after we leave, we can't issue a second response. That is a mechanism. Once we've gone out twice to warn, like for example, a location having a party, that we can then start implementing fines, and the fines are pretty steep from the city. It's not a, it would be in the law enforcement aspect. It's where the other one's showing up, we issue the second response. There is some follow-up from the Community Service Bureau to UC Berkeley afterwards, the area coordinator who has the South Campus in their district, basically will report back to the university and start working on solutions with the university about different frat houses and different houses that are, you know, student affiliates. That's a slower kind of process downstream, and probably not very exciting or satisfying to somebody who was kept up all night by a party, you know.
So the university doesn't have party patrols themselves. I mean, they aren't, again, I'm a little unclear what.
Currently, we don't. We used to partner with UC. UC used to put an officer out with our officers on party patrol. And that was a pretty good mechanism for them to take back the complaint and handle issues that they could handle of non-compliant students. They haven't been able to staff that for a while, so we're putting out our party patrols using Berkeley Police, and that's on an as-needed intelligence base. Like when we see that there's going to be a lot of parties, when there's a football game, you know, that's a limited service when we think there's a lot of parties. And when we send them out, we also encourage the officers to write those second responses if we get called back to the same place repeatedly. But again, a lot of that follow-up isn't very satisfying if you were kept up all night, or you expect that it's rush week and you're gonna be kept up all week. From, you know, that kind of behavior.
Okay, thanks.
So I've got two questions. So one, is there a different approach for repeat offenders than there is for first-time offenders? And you mentioned the fine, but I'm curious, is it maybe not really serial offenders, is I think probably the word.
That still all falls within the second, what we call the second response process. After we've been called out to a loud party a couple of times, we make them post the notification. It's actually posted in a conspicuous place that they've been second response. Then other officers who respond would make notes, and through this Community Service Bureau follow up instead of the fines. But that's.
So there is, that brings me to my second point, which is I think that the mediation outline here is really interesting. And an alternative, you know, something else that we can try for what I imagine are serial offenders that make up a lot of the 2,500 over a 3-month period complaints that we see in here. I know that we've met a mediator that works with the city. Is really all that needs to happen here for the BPD to modify their noise complaint policy to include a mediation step? Is that really all that would need to happen? If there is a mediator, there's a process. Is that kind of what the recommendation is saying here from the policy?
Well, there's budgetary implications of that. So the rec board, they have a mediation process that, correct me if I'm wrong, it could potentially receive some of these referrals, but now they're maxed out. And that's one of the concerns. So if you codify, then you need to make sure it's properly funded for something like this. So it's not just saying it's gonna be referred to mediation, but where's the money to come for the mediation program?
I'm maybe misremembering, but I'm trying to pull from the back of my head, like 6 months ago, we met a mediator that had tons of availability. They were looking for opportunities to do mediation, right?
That was for the personnel complaint.
That's for the personnel complaints, okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, mediation is mediation. I'm just saying, there's somebody on,
Right.
like, approved as a vendor for the city with tons of availability that need only referrals. What more than ABPD, let's start referring, mediators to this, to noise complaints, what do we need to do?
Is that rhetorical or is that?
I mean, I don't think maybe this is something for the policy board, but it feels like, I don't know, Lieutenant Montgomery, this is too easy of a win here to just say, can we add 2 lines to the noise complaint policy that includes a referral to mediation?
Yeah, I mean, we have access to seeds and community mediation. I just, as I hear that, usually what I see is like one party wanting relief and one party not caring. And so it's not always, we don't have a lever to force the party who doesn't care other than enforcement to engage in the process. It could be that maybe there's some off ramp once the process is started where somebody wants to start making nice with the neighbors. In fact, we've seen that before. We also, on a limited basis, because they're also impacted by staffing, the community service officer will make an appointment with a fraternity to sit down and talk to their leadership about the fines and the problems and sort of school them up on our responses and hope to bring them into a more neighborly space. For that, it kind of happens for the worst offenders. But yeah, I'm not sure the levers are there to sort of bypass all that process and get both parties involved. Very often, maybe there were cases I'm not aware of, but.
Who gets fined? Is it the landlord or the individuals?
Yeah, that's.
Or, I mean, maybe we should, yeah.
Yeah, one of the trickiest things about this enforcement is identifying the responsible party. You walk up to the door, you're greeted by a bunch of kids that don't live there. You have an alcohol element, you have a noise element, and you're trying to figure out, okay, who's responsible for this place? That's why most of that happens in the follow-up and the fall through. Okay, who's on the charter for this particular fraternity? Okay, well, what if it's not a fraternity? Right? They're kind of complicated little investigations. Typically, and they are, I'm not trying to portray these as frequent, they're on the rare side that we have to go that deep into a second response process. Typically, we've identified a party as responsible or an organization responsible, and then the fines start piling up if we keep going back there. A lot of times what we see is after that, the party moves. So they stop hosting the party at that address or at that location because it's been second response. But we also see people who rack up a lot of fines. Again, it's not a super frequent, we don't do dozens of these every weekend either. It's pretty complicated.
So I'm sorry, I'm not clear. Do you have the ability to levy a fine on the property owner?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you or?
Yes.
Okay.
I think board member Cantona.
We want to hear from them.
Yeah, I just want to hear from the plan.
Can I ask one thing, which is also like, the other thing that's just sort of not said here, and the lieutenant's alluded to it, is there more responsibility from the university here that we're like, should we be asking, not just on the reporting side, but on the response side? Like,
That's what I was
is our
thinking.
expectation, like, why should this all be BPD's responsibility? If these are also university affiliates. So I don't know how we speak to that in the report. But right now we talk about updating the MOU for reporting, but what about for response? What about for what should the expectation be? So it just feels like there's a gap here in terms of what
whose responsibility that is. So I don't know the answer, but I just observed that like, if they backed out of participating in these party patrols and that used to be a responsibility they shared and they're not, why is it all BPD's responsibility to do that?
Agreed, good point. Director Jose, if we can bring up the complainant.
Now would be the time to provide comments.
Hello, I'm Nicholas White, my White here's listed as primary in the complaint. And hello to the board and thank you for listening to us. This policy review report ODPA 2023 PR 0005 has some broad recommendations for possible improvements for City of Berkeley police responses, which if pursued might come into effect within 5 years. However, there are no recommendations for any changes in how City of Berkeley should respond the next time residents at 2734 College Avenue harass our household in the middle of the night. In what way does this report attempt to give us any hope for an effective outcome the next time our household needs protection from harassment by residents of 2734 College Avenue? This report looks at Berkeley Municipal Code, Chapter 13.40, but there's no mention of Berkeley Municipal Code, Chapter 13.48, which also applies and has been referenced frequently by City of Berkeley employees responding to our noise complaints as an excuse to do nothing. This report makes no mention of the clear flaws in BMC 13.48, such as the requirement in 13.48020 that there must be at least 10 offenders involved for the code to apply. There is no such constraint in BMC 1340 for animal noise. One noisy animal is sufficient for prohibited act. Another flaw in BMC 1340.070, which states, this chapter shall not be enforced in a manner which targets property, housing, students. Some officers have told us that that provision prevents them from enforcing the noise ordinance against residents of 2734 College Avenue. We have been told by certain City of Berkeley police officers that BMC 134850 and BMC 134860 rules for collection of costs are too difficult to enforce, so there's no point in doing all the paperwork. Finally, it is also quite striking that a report to the Police Accountability Board makes no mention of accountability of individual officers, City of Berkeley Police in general, or any other department in the City of Berkeley, for any past and future responses to significant harassing behavior from residents of 2734 College. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Anne White, and I am the respondent. When the trouble began, I was in my middle 70s. I'm now past 80. For 6 years, we were initially harassed. Eventually, it turned into terrorism. Our cars were vandalized, our home was vandalized, etc. But I'll go back to the beginning. The garage apartment next to our home was purchased by new owners. And each time we made the red dot is their building. The red roof with the solar panels is our home. Almost every police officer parked their car where the red box is. In front of a different building. Noise is a physical thing. By parking on the street, they took advantage of what is called an acoustic envelope. a way of not having access to the noise. So they parked on the street, it's College Avenue. There's a fair amount of noise there. And that building between 2734 and College Avenue absolutely eliminates the possibility of them hearing the noise. Officer Jessica Perry suggested, after years of problems, that it was my responsibility, when we made a complaint to Berkeley Police, that I should specifically instruct in that phone call to a busy phone center, that I should specifically instruct that the responding officer should get out of the car and walk down the driveway. That certainly increased the joy of the responding officers, who said, among other things, that I was not in a position to tell them how to do their job. You've asked about communication with the University of California at Berkeley. We've had communication with the University of California at Berkeley, specifically Jen Loy. She is a well-paid administrator. Jen Loy, on multiple occasions, including in writing, said, number one, it's not the university's problem. Once they move off of campus, the university doesn't care. Number two, she said specifically that the university didn't care how old I was. She was not impressed that elder abuse is in fact a violation of law, but neither was Berkeley Police. No one took it seriously. Every single officer who responded or I spoke to on the phone, I made sure to tell them my age. The number of snide responses that I received, I have written them on notepads and whatever. My notes are very messy. There are notes on the sides of a paper coffee cup, because that's what I had available. Most people, when they're going to bed at night, they take a shower, they put on their PJs, they may do some stretching. We made sure we had a piece of paper and a pen at our bedside. 2 p.m. is a very interesting time. It's not the only time. There were huge parties. There were games being played. There were all kinds of noises. A group of young women, some of them appeared to be lesbians, some straight, had violent, hair-pulling, face-scratching fights over their kitchen sink, which is 60 feet from our bedroom windows. Night after night after night after night. The restriction in Berkeley's law that there must be 10 people for there to be a noise complaint is simply immoral. a drunk, any one of the many drunks that have been resident in 2734 College Avenue over those 6+ years, chronic alcoholism, Jen Loy was not the least bit impressed when I pointed out to her that it seemed to me that there should be some responsibility by the university for the fact that these people were chronically drunk. So 2 o'clock in the morning, I don't know if that's when libraries close or when bars close, but somewhere between 1:30 and 2:30 in the morning, any one of the long 6 years of residence would come home drunk. Frequently, they would be drunk enough that they would puke rather loudly, and it stinks, 60 feet from our bedroom window. One commonly for a whole academic year. Please hear the quotation marks around academic. Got chronically drunk, which caused him to lose control of his bowels. And he would stand 60 feet from our bedroom window, clinging onto a car, exclaiming and explaining at very great volume exactly the intimate details of his failure to get himself inside because his bowels were not under control. It didn't take 10 drunks. One does a very effective job. And that particular young man, throughout that whole year, his drunken habit was in the area of 4 times a week.
Dr. White, I don't mean to interrupt, I just had to put in information for the chair. Typically, we provide 5 minutes for this, so they do need to deliberate and make a conclusion. So I just want to highlight to the chair that we're beyond that period.
Thank you. Am I being told to sit down?
Why don't we go ahead with 2 more minutes?
Because Berkeley Police failed to respond for more than 6 years, because the University of California at Berkeley, specifically in writing and repeatedly verbally, told us that, oh, let me quote Jen Loy, and I'm going to use her emphasis. My husband graduated from Cal. I went to a little school. Jen Loy said point blank, with witnesses, you are not part of our university. Therefore, our university will do nothing to protect you. And she was absolutely right. They did nothing. The final major disaster was one drunken morning, a Sunday morning, I believe it was January 28th, 2023. A group of some 20 young men, drunk out of their minds, angry because the police had visited them a few weeks before, decided to get even. And so, through the closed window of 2734 kitchen, they threw objects into our garden next door. They were annoyed initially because our trees were growing up, and when they threw things through the lower sash of the window, they couldn't get all the way into our garden. So of the closed kitchen window of 2734. Those objects included frying pans, I believe we had 9 bottles of hot sauce. Empty bottles of booze, none full. And I think in the end, there were 30 objects. Okay,
Thank you,
and,
we appreciate this.
and the most
We take all of your
delightful
information,
object
you're still in your consideration.
was a 3-foot tall sorority football trophy.
I'm sorry, Jay.
If I sound angry, it's because I am. The damage done to me and to everyone in our household.
You have to deliberate now, so we have to discuss this policy work. You can have a seat, we'll get this business going. Thank you.
Ms. Moody, just walk them through the process about the next steps here.
Could I just say one thing to the complainant?
Please.
Yeah, we're really sorry that you've been through this. It just sounds really awful. And we're gonna do what we can to try to help. We don't have any power of the municipal code the codes that you mentioned. I would, I suppose that's city council or city manager's business. But I can see how this has been terrible for you. And if I'd been without sleep as long as you have, I would be outraged as well. So.
The damage it did to the grandchildren
Yeah,
was disaster.
yeah. So we'll do what we can in terms of going forward, but I just, wanted you to know that we hear you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
In terms of procedure with this report, as our other policy recommendations go, this report is essentially a recommendation to the board. The board does have the authority given its policy review power to either accept our recommendations, propose amendments to our recommendations or report, or ask us to conduct additional research in any aspect of the report or provide additional information to the questions. So at this point, it's the board's to deliberate what it is they want the next steps on behalf of staff for this review.
And also just one clarification, last time we met, you decided to create a subcommittee because you felt that there were particular policies you want looked at, so that's also on the table.
Thoughts?
Well, I'm curious about what the department's response has been to all these complaints.
May I answer?
Sure.
Sergeant Valier responded to the, objects thrown through the window and actually wrote a complaint. I'm using the wrong word. We thank him for doing that. We have video of him explaining to the drunks involved his annoyance. That didn't quiet things down particularly. The newest group moved in a year ago, just about a year ago. Officer Futch. I have no idea what she did or who she spoke to. But after 2 loud, obnoxious parties by the newest group, Officer Futch went to 2734 in person and things have been quiet. I have now had almost a year of quiet. My grandchildren have had almost a year of quiet.
For information, both Officer Futch and Officer Vadi work in the Community Services Bureau.
Okay.
And these complaints funnel from patrol's response to them, and then they activate. So that's how.
Excellent. I'm glad that's working. Member Cayetano.
Yes, first, just to the complainants, I'm really sorry for everything that you've been through. I can't imagine just not being able to sleep for 6 years. The policy recommendations. I concur with Board Member Calavita that, they won't be able to reach what you're interested in, which is changing the municipal code. We just simply don't have the power. And I'm not a lawyer, definitely not your lawyer. But there are, civil suit options for abatement and injunction that will allow the police to, reach what you're interested in. So I would encourage you to explore those opportunities. But just for our particular purposes, for the recommendations that the director's office has made, I generally support a lot of them. I support, recommending the memorandum, that reviewing the MOU with Berkeley. I know it only reaches response, and there's just sort of a lot in here that in terms of like work capacity for the department that we would have to understand. So for example, the mediation, like, the training that goes into that, remember Moses brought up the other mediator that we have. I would be interested in knowing like when mediation would work if it were not sort of like imposed by a sworn officer as opposed to civilian. I don't know. And like Montgomery said, they just don't have like the incentive to right now. So I'm a little less sanguine about the mediation, but I support the other recommendations. I would be more interested in like hearing from the department what they think about mediation before, recommending that they go do this thing.
I support those recommendations as well, but I also think that we need to add something about requiring, I don't know, we can't require, but the university has to take more responsibility.
Definitely.
They really have to take more responsibility for their students, and this complaint goes beyond noise. This complaint is about vandalism and violent behavior in terms of, so, this is something the university has to acknowledge and be accountable for, on or off campus.
Yeah, I think we're reviewing the MOU to understand what the university says their jurisdiction is, so that, when they say this is not our concern, that we can say, no, it is your
Yes, it
concern.
is. Yes, it is.
I wonder, yeah.
I'll raise my hand so you can call on me when it's my turn.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I thought somebody else was talking. I'll put myself in the queue.
I have to say, so like, to what degree of certainty do we have that all of these individuals were actual students of the university? Is there 100% degree of certainty that they all were students?
They were all
Okay,
students.
Yeah.
The first group were graduate students who insisted that because they were graduate students at a famous university, there was no reason for them to stop partying. They even put a little mirror hanging ball in the middle of the tiny living room. After that, they were all undergraduates, and of course, they were all seniors, so that they would graduate and the rent could be raised.
Please.
Yeah, if I could offer while the status of a student, sort of out of compliance or breaking sort of the codes of the university kind of can play relevant in these situations. They're right, the municipal code says that we won't treat it, we won't target student housing. That doesn't mean we won't do enforcement at student housing, it just means that we are not focused on, we're agnostic as to whether it's just half students or all students or in our response. We're not, I guess on our end, as far as our enforcement, that's not as relevant. Although
Officers responding.
I would just like to jump in because I think we're hearing a lot from the complainant, and I understand that we do have a long agenda, and I just kind of would like to move this forward. I think if we're being asked today, if we're being asked today to accept staff's report and move forward the recommendations, or to accept it with modifications, I would kind of lean where Board Member Cayetano is in terms of standing up or proposing that the department launch a mediation program. That seems like a pretty intense effort. I don't know. It is consistent, as staff points out in their report, with other recommendations that have been made, including through the reimagining process. And I think that's important to highlight, irrespective of whether or not it's an actual recommendation of ours. I'm just wondering if specific recommendations could be made, because in these areas, I think if property owners are fined significantly, they will do more to get their tenants under control. And I think that if the university, if these were reported to the university, not in terms of how they're going to respond enforcement wise, but that they said for sort of vexatious repeat offenders, this would be a student honor code violation and they will deal with it that way. Then you're getting at both the property owner and the student. Maybe that is a more effective approach than trying to get the police to do more in this space, other than reporting to these entities or levying fines. So those would be additional recommendations that I would be interested in supporting, regardless of whether or not that's in our jurisdiction or what it would take to do that. It seems like that would be an effective way to deal with this problem.
Tim, I'm going to ask you, what is the department's position on mediation? Have you guys taken on any of these efforts? What would it be like to, boost this up and get this moving?
So for years, we've had a relationship or an offer from Seeds to look for opportunities to do mediation. My personal experience is kind of what I relayed earlier, which is we tend to deal with these problems by separating parties and talking to both parties. While there might be value of parties sitting down, I mean, you can see how deep these things go when there's an annoying neighbor, a nuisance neighbor. Oftentimes, neither party is really, it would be productive to sit down together. But that is kind of our version of like when you see the story of Officer Futch going out there and following up with the residents that have been a nuisance to their neighbors. That's our version. It's just conducted separately. I mean, in an ideal world, people would come together and everybody would hear one another and they'd leave better neighbors. But that's not the more frequent story.
So what I'm hearing from the department and Montgomery and from the board is we have a little reluctance to go further with this effort in mediation at this point, but the other issues that have been provided by the office, we can stand behind now and feel comfortable.
Yeah, and would people have any concern being more explicit in the first recommendation? Because I'm here about saying it's incident response and reporting, but like we want to look at the MOU on all of that.
Yes.
And
I was gonna say the same thing.
Right.
That update the MOU to increase the university's responsiveness and accountability.
Right.
Something along those
Because
lines.
limiting it to reporting is just after the fact. We want them at the table and participating from the outset. And I like what the vice chair said about, because then that also gets to the honor code stuff. Like, if we get them in the process earlier, it also allows some of those things to get going sooner than waiting.
I would like to encourage or keep the recommendation to explore the viability of the mediation program. To board member Cayetano's point, I don't know if it'll work. I don't know if there's anything else that we can that we can do in terms of what the response itself looks like, other than try mediation. I'm optimistic.
I like it. And I'm gonna ask the question on behalf to the board. Is there an appetite for us to say, hey, we'd like you to check on the viability of this strategy moving forward?
I think there's no harm in saying explore the liability. That's pretty
That's what 3 says. So.
general, but I think we need to be very specific about the university's
Yes.
responsibility.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing now is that we're comfortable with all of these recommendations. We can go forward. And I'm gonna ask for a motion. Oh.
Well, I just was gonna raise one more. Sorry, so close. This concept of targeting the property owner with financial penalties. Is that, I don't think that's necessarily captured. So
How would we do that? Is that?
I don't know enough.
I think that's a municipal.
Enough.
That already exists here in the municipal code.
Code enforcement. I think it's not necessarily police, but I just think if we're doing a policy review, but as far as I saw, we didn't actually make any recommendations about revisions to policy. So we're kind of being liberal in our scope. So I just think if we're being liberal in our scope, how about include a recommendation that I do think would be effective? Again, I don't know exactly. The city has mechanisms to code to fine property owners. We know this. So giving the police the ability to initiate that process again with repeat offenders, I think this would be effective for us to add, not knowing exactly the mechanics of how it would be done.
We do have that's a relationship between code enforcement and community services bureau. And particularly intractable neighbors, we sort of bring a lot of different city resources to bear. They're typically long-term problem solving, but that exists today.
Sounds like we should bring those to the table too on this one. Thank you. That's great to know. So I'm gonna ask for a motion and I want a second prepared to go. Sounds like we have consensus, so we're ready to move forward. Am I correct?
Yes.
All right.
With the changes that Jose's been making.
Yeah. We've got it covered over here.
So I move that we accept these recommendations in the report.
And a second.
Second.
Thank you.
Just clarification, because there's a point about with the amendments, is that with the amendments?
Which one?
With the amendments?
With the amendments, yeah.
And the second was by Board Member Moses?
Yes.
So now proceed to the roll call vote. Board Member Calavita,
Yes.
Board Member Lovett,
Yes.
Board Member Blackley,
Yes.
Board Member Cayetano,
Yes.
Board Member Moses,
Yes.
Board Member Williams,
Yes.
Vice Chair Wilson,
Yes.
and Chair Moore.
Yes.
The motion carries, 8 ayes, 0 noes. Okay.
Okay, excellent, thank you. All this takes us to 10A2, which is use of force review.
Okay. And Mr. Chair, I'll take the lead here, while Mr. Murillo is queuing up you guys are ready. Just a brief reminder how we got here. The use of force policy 300 has a provision that requires for annual review. Earlier this year, the board had its annual retreat. At that retreat, it was a request that we take a first initial review, before to guide the board discussion in the meeting that the PAB will have with the department. We took a different approach here, considering how robust and a resident historian, board member Calavita, I know she worked in the use of force policy in the PRC era, is that correct?
Well, yes.
Okay, so she can provide probably a little bit more context on the use of force policy and how it got here, but what we did for this review, we looked at different themes where we felt that there were potential gaps. During this period, you also received a policy review inquiry about the less lethal munitions and how they're displayed and what can and should not be done. Now, some of the questions, the way they were targeted or the way they were articulated would require a very specific use of force analysis to kind of determine, but we took a step back on a broader level and we saw what the policy may or may not indicate in those particular instances. But any use of force incident needs to be considered on the totality of the circumstances and determine the objective reasonableness. So, but all that to say, next slide, please. We were able to just look at some of the themes, the current policy. It has language on de-escalation, proportionality, and sanctity of life. These are things we also emphasized in our use of force forms when we went over the policy. There have been some community concerns, as we noted in the policy review, that was linked to this on less lethal munitions. if you saw and read the report, there was a lot of emphasis on, First Amendment. The reason for that, this particular policy inquiry was related, to some First Amendment and activity being done. And so that's why, you see a lot of language about that, and that's how the analysis was done. You can advance, please. So, policy 300, obviously regulates the use of force. Policy 428 is specific to First Amendment assemblies, but when it comes to particular areas where force must be used, it goes back to policy 300. So you have to kind of read these together to be able to make an analysis about that particular instance. Some of the findings here, again, the policy, there was a lot of work done on it. No policy is going to be perfect, but it does reflect from our review the national trends towards de-escalation. So that's something we do know. One of the things, though, in doing broader review, literature review, there's a doctrine that I think needs to be uplifted a little bit more when we're talking about use of force, and that is an officer creating jeopardy. So this is the notion that officers potentially create situations where they then have to use force because of poor tactical decisions or such. While the policy currently is silent on this sort of scenario, although it does guide officers in making sound decisions, but our review of it would be that it might be important to really start incorporating this very emergent, important doctrine that's in the literature. We did note that there's gaps in less lethal munitions guidance. So when it comes to display, the language is directed towards firearms, but not necessarily to less lethal. Now, obviously, a use of it would also fall under the broader use of force analysis. But when we talk about display, it's really in the policy right now on firearms. So that we saw that there might be some room for ensuring that the officers are guided there. Specialized care unit is not necessarily incorporated yet in the use of force. Again, there's emphasis on de-escalation, considerations for mental health, but we're starting up these different programs, and there might be an opportunity to have synergy in the policies. Next. Already mentioned the doctrine. If you can advance. Next slide. Okay. Again, there's a lot of these events that we see across the nation, and even historically here in Berkeley, we have an unfortunate situation where people lost their lives historically engaging in peaceful protests and armed protests. And it's important that we're regulating this. The city has taken a very proactive stance when it comes to these things, and it's just making sure that our policies are clearly providing as much guidance to the officers and are reflecting the community value. So advance the next slide, please. Okay, the other important part that we are recommending here, ABLE, we heard about it last week, and we've been hearing about it, last meeting, and we've been hearing about it for the last year. I think there's an opportunity, we believe there's an opportunity to inject some of the principles here to ensure that we have, again, cohesion between the cultural practices that we're trying to change to and also the policies. Now, there is a duty to intervene, that's listed there, but what does that really look like? And I think ABLE is giving the officers a really clear toolkit to be able to intervene effectively. So that's an opportunity there. I'll emphasize the less lethal munitions, while they're noted in both policies, there seems to be, it's silent on the display area, which were the three central questions of the policy complainant, in terms of how they're displayed. And because they were displayed potentially in these protest incidents in this particular, that there might be an opportunity to ensure that officers understand, also community members understand what can or not happen in these events. I'll keep emphasizing the officer creating jeopardy doctrine. I think it's an important doctrine that we could be on the front line. I haven't seen too many policies that have been discussing it. We noted the NACO webinar where this was, discussed, is the evolution on use of force. Ashley, it's for former captain, Heiberger, he has, done a lot of these trainings. We'll get to meet him in person if we haven't met him, next week at NACO, I'm sure he'll be there. But I think it's an opportunity to broaden the discussion here. You cannot create an incident where then you have to use force. So we have to ensure we're making sound tactical decisions. And again, enhancing the SEU coordination, which the board has picked up on in the last few weeks here. I'll go ahead and stop it here and then see if there's any questions. Again, we didn't do any specific red line in here. We did it more broader in terms of themes and topics.
I have a question, yeah, a couple questions. One, I guess you were just saying on the officer created jeopardy. My initial response was, well, what language would you put in the policy? So, but I guess you just didn't get to specific language. I was having a hard time understanding that. So I worked on the use of force policy too. When it comes to the less lethal munitions, maybe you could give us some more. I think I've asked about this in the past, but I've kind of forgotten exactly what they are, what they look like. And if you could just give us like a brief, very brief tutorial about what they are.
Yeah, so we use two different less lethal launcher systems. They look like a short rifle. One of them looks like a paintball rifle. And in fact, it's a modified paintball system. They are sort of short black rifles. They're too large for an officer to pocket. So when we deploy into the field for protests response, we deploy prepared for both peaceful and not peaceful. That means that officers are assigned that equipment and they have to secure it and essentially wear it. So people will see officers in the field wearing the equipment like we wear our guns, but there's no holster for something that large. So typically it's slung. There's been, we've heard of people saying, oh, well, I saw an officer drive by in a minivan and they were holding it while they're wearing it. Because it's a piece of equipment. They're holding it on their lap, it's slung across their shoulder. So people will see it. That's not the same thing as brandishing it or pointing it at people. That's an officer wearing the equipment in the field.
And they're less lethal because if they're fired, they're not gonna kill a person?
Yeah, the less lethal means that it's less likely to be lethal. It's designed not to be lethal. That's not to say that they're completely not lethal. They are designed and deployed to basically be a level of force of a baton strike, or to deliver basically a baton strike at a distance, at range where you couldn't ordinarily reach somebody. It also creates, that particular system creates space. One of our principles for de-escalation is to create time and distance, to not get engaged directly so closely with the crowd or a person who's doing illegal behavior that we're now involved in a physical hand-to-hand fight. So they are a system designed to create standoff and less conflict with the crowd, but still be able to address of that.
Why is that? It creates less conflict?
Because we don't have to approach the crowd with a whole bunch of officers to deal with somebody, for example, assaulting somebody or attacking somebody.
Because you can fire.
Because we can fire it at distance. They're extremely accurate systems. They're typically equipped with holographic sights. They fire very accurately over 100 feet or more. We have them there as a contingency, right? But we're not. I think it's been characterized that we're the deployment. What does deployment mean? Is that we're aiming the gun at somebody? I think people will see them in the field when officers are slung in at potentially their protest is going very well. And typically in that instance, they would see officers coming to and from or leaving in minivans or things like that. They would deploy in vans marked as police vehicles.
But if they were in a minivan, couldn't they be stored nearby, or in order to be effective, they have to actually be slung across the
Yeah, there is an issue about maintaining safety of the weapon. We don't have, when we use minivans, we don't have the ability to lock them up. Typically in a patrol vehicle, they're locked into an electrolock alongside the officer. But when we deploy in crowd control, we have to rent vehicles and they're not so equipped. So typically once an officer who's been assigned one, they carry it with them the entire day.
Board Member Cayetano.
First, I would like to congratulate the directors and whoever else worked on this. This is a really good amendment report. It's really well written and it's very comprehensive. I was very impressed with it. I think that for the less lethal munitions, I remember this complaint. I remember saying that I was interested in the First Amendment assemblies. I'm intimately familiar with less lethal weapons, as I've had a couple pointed at me. And I've also reviewed hundreds of hours of body cam from protests. And I do, it's more of a question for Lieutenant Montgomery. When you read the deployment subsection for use of force payments through 300.7, where it says use of a firearm, do you read that to also include less lethals, or is that only for firearms? It's 300.4.1, sorry.
Not having it in front of me, I would say my belief is that we distinguish in the policy the less lethal systems from our rifles and pistols as firearms. Although technically they are a firearm, they're just adapted to fire a less lethal round.
Yeah, I guess I would then, assuming that's right, I would just highly encourage the department to adopt the same standard for less lethal weapons, because when they're used, I mean, I know it's difficult at protests. I mean, you're pointing at a crowd. There's not like one person you're pointing it at. You're just sort of like looking at many people in a crowd.
Well, to clarify, the policy does say that when we use our less lethal system, that we should have a specific target. They're not for indiscriminate use. And I think that's a hard thing for a crowd to perceive, that an operator may be training the less lethal system on a specific target. It's hard for them to perceive, but that's our policy and that's our practice.
Sure,
we not use it indiscriminately.
Okay, well, that's good to know. I have seen, plenty of photos and videos of people blinded and, physically incapacitated from less lethals. And I just think that including less lethals within this drawing and pointing firearms subsection would be my recommendation. So for not pointing it directly at someone, discriminately, not indiscriminately, unless they either A or B in this situation. And I would ask.
Can you read it here?
Yeah, sure. I can read it if it's helpful. You want to give it to you? Okay. Just says, I'll just read it. It says, given that individuals may perceive the display of a firearm or less lethal, I would just recommend or less lethal munition as a potential application of force, which it definitely is. Officers should carefully evaluate each tactical situation and use sound discretion when drawing a firearm in public by considering the following guidelines. If the officer does not initially perceive a threat, but it is objectively reasonable that the potential for such threat exists, firearms should generally be kept in the low ready or other position not directed toward an individual if it is objectively reasonable.
Yeah, that I think I appreciate the distinction and nuance that you're putting out there, and that is consistent with the way we perform this tool.
Okay. I think the policy complaint was questioning whether it was explicit or like what the practice was, and I think it's worth making explicit even if that is the practice. But yeah, thanks for the clarification. So you're saying that it is within the practice of the department?
Yeah, we train and treat them like a firearm, but they are, I think, in the it has to do with the military ordnance equipment.
Sure.
We treat that as a separate category of firearm than our lethal firearms.
When you report it.
Yeah. And I'd have to go over all four of those policies in detail, but what you're saying is not, that is consistent with our practice and our training for this weapon system. We treat it like we firearm.
Yeah, that's really good news then. It means that wouldn't be too much of an issue to update the policy.
So then we could update that section of the policy to include less lethal, not just firearms.
Especially, yeah, I mean, that's the way that they retrain in practice.
So the trick is it's in a section called use of deadly force, but I mean, but the point is we'll take I mean,
Yeah.
what is the use of the force, but.
That may be the way it's not listed right there.
Okay.
I would want to go back and look at where it is listed.
We would have to
Make
go
sure there's
through
not
the
error
whole thing to see.
Yeah.
Right.
And there's a way, there's
Could be lots of places.
ways to put it in there.
But I think the concern is valid and it's our concern too in our training.
Good, thank you.
Director.
If I may just briefly respond to Board Member Lethbridge. I think, yeah, we have some suggestions of what the language could look like, but just to give you a concrete example, and this is a public record, so I'm comfortable using it, but I think the doctrine of officer created jeopardy, obviously, it's not just codifying, but also training on it. So one specific example in a jurisdiction I know I worked in, there were 2 college students, drunk in public, causing nuisance. Their officers were trying to make contact with them. They ran away into their vehicle. They clearly got in the vehicle. One of the officers got in front of the vehicle, said, "Stop." The individual, the driver, swerved, tried to swerve around the officer and made contact with her with the vehicle. The partner who was behind just saw the officer get struck. He didn't really see the stop. He thought that he was actively trying to, from the officer's perspective, to trying to kill this officer. So he used, withdrew his firearm, several rounds at the college students. None of them hit. They went and they caught him in a nearby jurisdiction. But to me, that is an example of what were you trying to accomplish by getting in front of a moving vehicle? And did you create the situation where potentially your partner saw this and thought that force needed to be used? And I don't, there's nuances to different jurisdictions, but don't put yourself in a bad tactical situation where now you have to use force.
No, I understand the concept, but were you proposing that the use of force policy be amended to incorporate some language reflecting?
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, and then I just took your opportunity, but I think we can give you some language. I was just saying, just broaden it out, just in case somebody might have a disconnect with like what we're trying to accomplish here.
I'm sorry to speak twice before everyone else has spoken, but I would, encourage you guys to maybe look at ways to integrate that insight that you have into the early intervention system. Since, there's, I think if you can identify factors that I can then, push through the system, and I don't know, just to think about. But
Director, I don't understand the difference between the officer created jeopardy doctrine and the de-escalation tactics that are already in the use of force policy 300.3.4, which is all about not putting yourself in a situation where down the line you're going to have to use force. It's about, it very much is in line with the, what do you call it? The photograph that you might have here. I've lost my page. There's a photograph, a screenshot, on page 16. The officer created jeopardy screenshot where it talks about concepts like distance, cover, concealment. This whole section sounds very much like what we have in the de-escalation section. And I remember Officer Fonby, was it Officer Fonby or Sergeant?
He retired as a lieutenant.
Lieutenant, well, but when he came to the PRC and gave I think it was a presentation on de-escalation. And it was very much about these techniques to avoid having to use force down the line. So I'm just wondering, and it is in the use, there's a section in the in the use of force policy 300.3.4, which goes into some detail about what that would look like. And I'm just wondering, isn't that pretty much what we're talking about here in terms of avoiding officer created jeopardy.
Yeah, I don't disagree that there's overlap, and I thought we, try to highlight that there's already some language. I think we should be having a broader discussion is, when does the tactical decision making start? So de-escalation, yes, in general, you have to, when you have your encounter, but just having a more concerted effort about like how you're gonna position your vehicle, all these things that a lot of the training is already done, but the doctrine and some scholars are saying, let's extend the time of when we call this event of force. Like, did it just happen in the immediate time that the officer withdrew his weapon, or was it any preceding factors beforehand? And I agree, there's overlap in de-escalation already, but I think the doctrine is pushing for a more concerted effort in holistic tactical decision making.
I wonder if that belongs in the use of force policy, or if that could just be a recommendation for additional training in this particular doctrine. But that was one thing I had. And then, also, I do feel like, especially because I think this originated in a policy complaint about, is this the one? No, never mind. But we had in the past a policy complaint about handcuffing. And is it?
I didn't think so.
I'm confused. I'm a little confused. I'm not, but anyway, if we're going to somehow figure out the level 1 reporting issue and truncate what needs to be reported, and I believe somebody recommended that. Oh, it's in your Citygate analysis. Yeah, it's in the Citygate analysis that we need to find out exactly how much time is being spent on that level 1 reporting. And then at some point we might consider, it seems like a good idea, if excessive amounts of time are used doing that we could consider truncating that somehow. If we do, I feel strongly that handcuffing ought to be in that level 1 use of force, because in that level 1 use of force, it's something like verbal commands is in there. And handcuffing, we've seen descriptions from various people who've come to us that they have suffered from the handcuffing. Okay, so if we're going to include things that are much less intrusive than handcuffing in level 1, and I do think we need to acknowledge that it is a type of use of force, and there is quite a lot of detail in other policies about being careful when you handcuff people. So I don't see any rationale for not having it under level 1. So that would be and we talked about this in the past, but it's not in this report, and I'm just suggesting that it needs to be in there. Especially if we're going to truncate what's required in the reporting.
Ted, let's speak on this.
Yeah, I think, I appreciate that. I think the issue is that we handcuff every single person that we arrest. And a small subset of those may result in a complaint, which could be addressed by investigating that complaint and seeing if that particular use of force, without increasing the administrative burden that the supervisor would be writing a use of force report on every single handcuffing. That literally would require for thousands of additional reports a year that aren't being written now. So I think we have it covered because we have handcuffing policy, we have handcuffing training, we have a mechanism for investigating whether that was excessive force or how the handcuffs were applied. And it sort of goes against the recommendation, which was to, change the administrative burden around the
Is
level
there
ones.
reporting of the numbers of the number of handcuffing?
What do you mean?
Is it tracked so that you could, we asked you how many people were handcuffed, or are you saying it's just every single person that was arrested, so if you?
Well, some people will be handcuffed and not arrested, for example, a temporary detention where somebody's released. But I'm trying to give you an idea that how many more additional use of force reports are guaranteed, because every time we arrest somebody, we handcuff them.
But is it reported someplace, even if it isn't a use of force report, is it tracked internally so that the department knows how many people handcuffed?
It isn't currently, so handcuffing isn't currently a level 1 use of force, neither is giving verbal orders. And so it isn't currently, officers typically will reduce it in their report. They handcuff somebody, detain somebody. But no, it's not part of the use of force report currently.
Well, I knew it wasn't part of use of force, I just thought maybe someplace else, the number would be there.
I'd have to think about that. I think
If I may recall correctly, the RIPA data, charges of actions taken includes handcuffing.
for every detention, thank you. Yeah, I'm sitting here searching my database here.
Okay,
Sorry, how is RIPA data? Like they report it, they.
It's for stops, for
every step.
every stop.
Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and wrap this discussion up. So I'd like everyone to, we don't have to come to a consensus here, but let's see if we can find some common ground. Go ahead, Director.
Sorry, and I don't
No,
mean to
no.
cut you up. So but just procedurally, you do have to convene a meeting with the department, so that potentially could be your next step, and this could be sort of a starting point. So you don't necessarily need to adopt any of the recommendations here, but perhaps start scheduling that meeting with the department and what that looks like.
Are we open to that as a board? I think so.
Can you clarify what the meeting is? A meeting to discuss this report?
It's an annual review of the use of force policy.
Okay. And that would be with our whole board, like we could use a portion of one of our meetings to have that meeting?
Potentially, or you could do it as a special meeting. It doesn't have to be tied to this regular meeting.
Okay, thanks.
Isn't that supposed to be in collaboration with the department?
Yeah, so the language is in 300.13 policy review and updates. At least annually, the Berkeley Police Department and the PAB shall convene to review and update the use of force policy to reflect development practices and procedures per SB 230.
Shall meet in session, meet with the department.
Shall meet with the department.
Oh, it did say.
The Berkeley Police Department and the PAB shall convene to review and update the use of force policy.
So where we need to go is, are we comfortable as a body initiating these meetings? And if so, I'd like a motion. I'm tired.
Can I just ask, so it's an annual thing and we haven't done it? No.
Right. This would be the
But it's
first.
not like there's some particular deadline, I'm just thinking of all the things we already have underway, but.
I'll make a motion that we accept the staff report and that we ask staff to facilitate a meeting between the PAB and the department to review the report. And I would ask you to try to do it as one of our regularly scheduled meetings, just to make the best use of everybody's time. But if that's not possible, then we'll have to circulate other date options. That's my motion.
I second that motion.
Okay, I'll proceed with the roll call vote. Board Member Calavita,
Yes.
Board Member Leftwich,
Yes.
Board Member Blackie,
Yes.
Board Member Cayetano,
Yes.
Board Member Moses.
Yes.
Board Member Williams,
Yes.
Vice Chair Wilson.
Yeah.
And Chairman.
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries.
Thank you, Jose. This takes us to 10B, excuse me. Discussion and action on Chair Moore's proposal to the PAB to initiate a policy review on social media usage by law enforcement. And let me just share why I'm bringing this to the board. I follow the department and I try to keep up with everything on the Instagram as as the kids do and such. And I ran across some posts that left me a little concerned. And, you know, I inquired with the director about the policy because there was a post that was reposted by the BPA that was about the SRT, that was about the Berkeley Police Department. And I don't know if anyone approved the language. I don't think the language was great. I'll be very clear. I don't think this was the kind of message that we want to send out. It was way more warrior and way more guardian. And I wanted to know, where's the policy on this? Who greenlights these posts? Is this okay that the BPA is reposting from the police department about the SRT program, and you know, who's approving of this language? And I think it's concerning just because, you know, we're reimagining policing. I think messaging is everything, especially as we're doing outreach. So I thought this is something we should take a look at. We don't have to put 10 minutes on it at this point, but I want to make sure the board is aware of these concerns, that I brought this up here and now. And then if we want to take this on, I'm here to have a conversation with you. That's where that's at.
Sounds like a good idea to me.
Question, is it, and this, so this was this about specific officers, or this was about just the context of it? Was it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And context is important. It was about not the officers, but the unit.
Okay.
And about them doing well as the SRT, and, you know, it's good that I believe the officers should have good morale.
Yeah.
It's when they do something great, I'm the first one to be like, woo woo.
Right.
However, there's a filtering of the message. We want to make sure that everybody's on the same page. I want to make sure that the chief knows these messages are going out. I don't know what the policy is, who's greenlighting these, and you know, should we have this under our purview as a body? Is this something as a policy review we'd like to take a look at? You know, I'm bringing it to you all because I think it's something we should discuss. Thoughts? We can keep this short too.
Yeah, because I just think there's a lot of layers. There's like sort of the official department piece of this. There's and then individual officers on or off duty. I mean, there's a lot of layers to the onion. So I'm just trying to figure out if there's a particular slice or if it's kind of all of it.
All encompassing, yeah. And, you know, that's something that we'd have to look at. How, you know, directed do we want this policy to be? We're not trying to destroy any of the department's morale. We're not trying to take away anyone's First Amendment rights. However, you know, when we're championing things about the department, I got 10 things better than that, the SRT, that I want to highlight, you know, and maybe the chief too. And I don't know if she has any influence or any control over what the posting is, but it's something we should talk about.
I guess my concern is just that we have so much already on our plates, and so the way I view these things is that if there's a particular board member who really wants to take it on, I mean, it sounds interesting to me. I personally can't take anything else on.
Yeah.
But
What about an option where we ask the chief to speak to this in the next meeting when she makes her remarks, like what is the department policy, to take a look at the specific post that was, you know, at issue that you're highlighting, and does she have any issues with it? I don't know. Again, like trying to use the time and the structures that we already have set up to at least initiate a little bit of discussion and get the chief's views on it as a way of just advancing this without creating like a whole bunch of work for anyone.
If you could give the chief a heads up that that's
I
something
think that's a
we'd
great
like
idea.
to know about.
yeah,
Ah,
and then take it from there.
Yep.
Excellent, thank you. Is there anything else on this subject? If not, I'm gonna move on. Sounds like we're moving. And that will take us to 10C, discussion and action, appointing a liaison to assist with drafting the annual report. Go ahead.
I
didn't hear anyone breathe.
I would just propose that Alex and I take that on as the members of the ops committee. I think that's appropriate for us to do. Sorry, Alex.
That's okay.
That sounds excellent. I think I second that motion. Thank you.
I really do thank you for your service. That's a lot you just volunteered for right there.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you didn't hear me volunteering for anything else tonight. So I had that in mind.
It's shocking off, shocking off.
I believe in ODPA's ability to carry most of the water.
For record keeping purposes, and I know we're trying to move this along, just to be clear, the motion is to assign the operations subcommittee as the liaison to the ODPA for the annual report. Okay. And that was motion by
Vice Chair.
by the vice chair and seconded by
Yes.
Calvino. Okay. Roll call vote, Board Member Calvino?
Yes.
Board Member Leftwich?
Yes.
Board Member Blackley?
Yes.
Board Member Cayetano?
Yes.
Board Member Moses?
Yes.
Board Member Williams?
Yeah.
Vice Chair Wilson?
Yes.
And Chair Moore?
Yes.
Okay, motion carries.
Wonderful. Love that the answer was fast. Discussion and action on the PAB's 2025 regular meeting calendar.
For this particular item, the city council finalized their meeting dates, and we were provided with the holidays that were awarded, so we present to you today just proposed calendar. The board doesn't necessarily have to take action on it today. We just wanted to bring that forward, as soon as we could, just to make sure, we recognize that there are several, different time constraints that board members may have, so we wanted to get that ahead as we could and not necessarily, in December or in.
What I'd like to propose is everyone take a look at this and at our next meeting, we agendize to go ahead and solidify.
And I'm sorry, but there's several things included in the packet for this item. What is the actual proposal for the PAB meeting dates for 2025? Which is that the thing that looks like a calendar?
On 57, it has the on the regular packet for 2025 PAB regular meeting calendar. What's the proposed dates?
And the calendar's on page 58.
So everyone take a look at those.
It says 2025 PAB regular meeting calendar, that one, but the dates all say 2024.
Oh,
Is that
sorry. That's a typo.
That's right.
okay? All right. That's what was
The
confusing.
dates are correct, yes.
Okay, the dates are correct, good catch there, Vice Chair. We're gonna take a look at this next meeting and agendize it to go further, so everyone take a look at it on your own. And this is going to take us to discussion and action on policy reviews. E1.
We have, so I want to just summarize this by, saying that there are different ways, to review some of these policies and practices. Sometimes we require some information, sometimes, that information is publicly available, sometimes it's really fact specific, and we try to ground ourselves on, in being able to do a thorough review, understanding all the facts and circumstances. And those particular policy reviews that we listed there, that have been open for quite a while, we have requested some documents from the department, and we have not received them back. When we had this impasse in the past, we have informed the board, that there is the avenue, should they choose to exercise it, to subpoena the records. So this is where we are now. In terms of those policy reviews, we have requested some documents and haven't received them back. So potentially we can utilize the subpoena to compel the production of these records.
Where are we on 10B? Like, is that?
Mile?
10E.
10. Did we skip? Okay.
We got all this.
Did we skip 10B?
No, that's what,
Yes,
Chip was
he
talking
just did
about.
that. No, but, okay, that's not what mine is. These are about the internal affairs records.
Yeah, that's this one.
Why are they?
Oh, it should be 10E, it's just a typo one.
I'm on page 44.
Yeah, that's for
Yeah,
10E.
but that's
for
this issue.
Yeah, it's a Cindy.
Oh, that's just.
Okay.
I will write it. What do you need me to write in?
I'm just trying to make sure that we're on the right page. I'm on the right page.
Yeah.
Okay. We're on page, what page are we on? 45. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. The
Okay.
material's correct. Page 44.
Okay.
Can you just give us a one-liner to refresh our recollection about the subject matter?
Sure, I'll refer to our policy analyst.
Just something real quick.
Yeah, so I'll go with 19 and 17 first, but, just because these are the ones that are more familiar with the board. 17, this is a policy that started as a self-initiated personnel complaint, surrounding the death at Alta Bay Summit Medical Center. Yeah, this was the medical emergency with the handcuff.
Yeah, I remember now. Okay.
Number 19 was the death of the inebriated individual,
Okay.
that was released from the Berkeley PD jail. Unless I hope it's the.
Let me make a point of order before we get this, this agenda item. I know we are in a long meeting. We're gonna have 3 hours straight.
Oh, is that what you, yeah,
Yeah.
sure. I was gonna try and do it right before closed session, but if you need to
Sure,
go.
I
Let's
would
go.
love to make it a closed session, but if we're still another 45 minutes.
No, we
No,
are
I
not.
don't think so.
Can staff please explain, we've got 4 items. What are the goals associated with each item? What is it that you're looking for? 2 of them have this question as to whether or not we want to exercise our subpoena power, as I understand it. And 2 of them, what? Maybe you could help frame what we're doing here. Not individually, but just like the 4. What's the goal?
Right, that's what I was trying to do in the introduction to this, that we at an impasse. And we can either continue the policy review without these documents, or we can compel the department through a subpoena to provide us the records. So this is.
All 4 you're at an impasse? I thought only 2. Okay, I misunderstood that. So all 4 were at an impasse.
And this, we're doing this under the delegated authority that you guys given to us, not personnel records. I would bring this forward to you. I would just make the decision, but I want to make sure that I'm representing the wishes of the board in this.
So what we're here to do is to see if the board supports the actions of the Office of Director of Police Accountability in issuing the subpoenas for records that we have been looking for years. I'm gonna speak very plainly and quickly on this. This is something that, not only did we, and I was kind of waiting to get to this point today. Not only did, because of the great work of this board, win the right to subpoena, documents that we need, but also that we have buy-in not only from the department, but from city administration about our role within the city about transparency and accountability. And thank you, Julie, that was because of your memo. I've been waiting all night to get to this point and say, I believe, I don't generally make motions as the chair here, but on this one, I would, be honored to go ahead and say that I support the Office Director of Police Accountability and it's, directed to issue subpoenas, for records within the city of Berkeley.
Can we issue one subpoena for the records that are included in these 4?
I have to do
That
one.
we're requesting connected to
A
these
single
4?
subpoena for all.
We don't have to do 4 subpoenas, right?
We can look at the logistics of that, but, yeah.
He just needs to go ahead from us that he has our support.
And you've requested these records consistently?
Yes, and even right prior to this meeting, when the new information was provided to us, to see if that changed anything. We didn't receive a response back.
Okay, I will second the motion, but I just would make a comment, forgive me, but I think the work we've reviewed tonight is quite good, but the reports are also very long. And at some point, we lose our ability to make impact when we inundate the reader with really lengthy reports. I think like highlighting the recommendations up front is helpful. But so I would just say, I support what you're trying to do, but I do think I would encourage staff to also perhaps as you're doing the analysis, after you get the subpoena documents, to do an assessment, impartial assessment of whether or not you really needed those to do your work. Because I think we need to have a bit of a more nimble approach, perhaps sometimes. I don't know enough about these to know if this is the right time to direct such a nimble approach. That's why I'll support the motion, but I would just ask that you consider that as you do the work. But I have
had
seconded.
a similar thought just about the length of our meetings and the amount of reading that's required and the number of agenda items. And if we could do it, it'd be great to have a shorter agenda. And I don't know if everything, we've got a lot to do. We have a lot of responsibility, but it sure would be great if our agendas could be shorter.
If I may, Chair, we're conflating issues here, so I just want.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying, that's what I think guess what, I'm gonna really do it right now, we're gonna go ahead and focus. There is a motion and a second on the table right now, and I'd like us to act on that. We'll have time after this, if we need to discuss something, but let's get this business done.
Okay, so on the motion to support the ODP's request to issue the subpoenas, a motion by Chair Moore, seconded by Vice Chair Wilson. Board Member Calavita,
Yes.
Board Member Lethwich.
Yes.
Board Member Blackerby,
Yes.
Board Member Cayetano,
Yes.
Board Member Moses,
Yes.
Board Member Williams,
Yeah.
Vice Chair Wilson,
Yes.
and Chair Moore.
Yes,
Motion carries.
right. Thank you for the speedy work, the expedition was everything to me. This is agenda item number 11, this is public comment.
Okay, thank you, everyone. As a reminder, speakers are generally allotted up to 3 minutes, but maybe a lot less time if there are many speakers. They may comment on any matter within the board's jurisdiction at this time, except confidential personnel matters. I will start with any members of the public who are physically present before moving on to our virtual attendees. Do we have any? Seeing no members of the public physically present, I'll now go on to our virtual attendees. Caspar Turner, you have been granted permission to speak. Please let me know when you're ready so we can start 3 minutes on the clock.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh yeah, I'm just a student reporter for the Daily Cal. And I was wondering if Chair Moore could speak as to specifically what the comments are that were made about the SRT.
So we don't directly address questions to public comment, but if you visit our website, you can send media inquiries to our office and we'll be happy to connect with you.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, with that, we have no additional hands raised.
Well, with no more public comment for this evening, that takes us to agenda item number 12, which is closed session.
All right, you guys there.
The video will be closed. Vice Chair Wilson, we did email you a separate link.
I got
we'll
it.
be joining that link shortly.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
I'm gonna take a back.
Chair, we are live.
Quick session and back to agenda item number 12, which is the findings, 13, which is the findings. The board has decided to approve of to support the recommendations of the Office Director of Police Accountability. And now I'm just asking for someone.
Second.
Need a first.
Need a first on that, but he was good. That was the fastest second I've ever seen. I need a first to adjourn this
I
meeting.
move that we.
Second.
Thank you for your service.